The auctioneer's hammer crashed down with finality across Harvest Valley's town square as Emma Sullivan watched her family's century-old farm sell to the highest bidder. Tears streamed down her weathered face as she believed all hope was lost, until a well-dressed stranger in tailored clothing stepped forward with a bid that silenced the crowd. What followed between farmer Emma Sullivan and tech entrepreneur Nathan Hargrove not only rescued a family legacy, but ignited a movement that would stand against corporate giants threatening America's heartland. A brief pause before we begin. Write in the comments where you're listening to our stories from. Subscribe to our channel, it's free, and you can always change your mind. Enjoy the story. The auctioneer's hammer crashed down with finality across Harvest Valley's town square, silencing the murmurs that had rippled through the crowd. Emma Sullivan flinched at the sound, her calloused hands gripping the wooden bench until her knuckles turned white. Her family's century-old farm, 5 generations of blood, sweat, and memories, was being sold to the highest bidder while she watched, powerless. Sold for $750,000 to Meridian Agricultural Holdings, the auctioneer announced, his voice devoid of emotion. Emma could feel her neighbor's pitying glances burning into her back as tears streamed down her weathered face. The Sullivan farm was the 3rd local property acquired by Meridian this month alone. Another piece of America's heartland, swallowed by corporate giants who saw the land only as numbers on a spreadsheet. A suited executive from Meridian stepped forward to complete the paperwork, his polished shoes clicking against the wooden floor of the courthouse steps. The sound echoed like bullets in Emma's ears. Wait, the single word cut through the air like a thunderclap. Heads turned toward the source, a tall man in his early 40s standing at the back of the crowd. Unlike the Meridian executives with their identical Navy suits, he wore a tailored charcoal blazer over a simple button-down shirt, expensive but understated. "I'd like to place a bid," he said, his voice calm but commanding. The auctioneer frowned. "Sir, the auction has concluded. Meridian's bid has been accepted." $800,000, the stranger said, stepping forward. "Cash." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as the Meridian executive's face darkened. "Sir, as I explained, bidding is closed." $1 million, the stranger interrupted, pulling out his phone. "I can transfer the funds immediately." The auctioneer looked uncertainly between the stranger and the Meridian executive, whose face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is highly irregular," the Meridian man sputtered. "We won the auction fair and square." The stranger smiled thinly. "Fair? Like how Meridian manipulated crop prices last season to force local farmers into debt. Or how your company bought the water rights upstream and tripled irrigation costs." Whispers erupted through the crowd. Emma rose to her feet, heart pounding. Who was this man? The auctioneer cleared his throat nervously. Mr. Hargrove, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, there are procedures." Nathan Hargrove. The name registered in Emma's mind. The tech entrepreneur who'd made billions in Silicon Valley before mysteriously stepping away from his company last year. What was he doing in a struggling agricultural town like Harvest Valley? $1.2 million, another voice called out. The Meridian executive was on his phone now too, clearly receiving new instructions. Nathan didn't hesitate. $2 million, the crowd fell silent. $2 million, Nathan repeated, looking directly at Emma now. For the Sullivan farm, with the condition that Emma Sullivan retains full operational control and right of first refusal should the property ever be sold again. Emma's breath caught in her throat as their eyes met across the crowded square. In his gaze, she saw something unexpected, not pity or calculation, but genuine conviction. Emma found herself in the courthouse conference room 30 minutes later, across the table from Nathan Hargrove. The sudden turn of events left her mind reeling. Her lawyer, Ted Michaels, who was also her second cousin and had prepared for a day of damage control, not negotiation, fumbled through his briefcase beside her. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet with me," Nathan said, placing a sleek laptop on the table between them. "Did I have a choice?" Emma replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "You just spent $2 million on my farm." "Your farm," Nathan emphasized. "That's the key point. I'm not buying your farm to own it. I'm buying it to save it." Ted cleared his throat. "Mr. Hargrove, while we're certainly grateful for your intervention, we can't help but wonder why a Silicon Valley billionaire is suddenly interested in a family farm in Harvest Valley." Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly at the word billionaire, but his expression remained open. "Fair question. Let's start with the basics. Do you know what my company, Green Tech, does?" Emma shrugged. Makes you rich, apparently. A smile flickered across Nathan's face. It started as a precision agriculture software company. We developed AI systems to help farmers optimize irrigation, predict pest outbreaks, and improve yields while using fewer resources. And now it makes surveillance systems for the government, Emma added. She'd read about the company's controversial pivot after Nathan had left. That's what happened after I was forced out, Nathan said, his jaw tightening. Which is part of why I'm here. He opened his laptop and turned it to face them. On the screen was a map of Harvest Valley County with about a third of the properties highlighted in red. These are all the farms Meridian has acquired in the last 3 years, Nathan explained. And these, he clicked a button and more properties turned yellow, are the farms they're targeting next. Emma leaned forward, scanning the map. Her farm was among the yellow properties, along with most of her neighbors. How do you know this? Ted asked, suspicion evident in his voice. Because I've been investigating Meridian for the past 6 months, Nathan replied. Blake Foster, Meridian's CEO, and I went to business school together. We were friends once, but our paths diverged dramatically. Emma studied Nathan's face. There was something personal in his tone, a history he wasn't sharing. What does Blake Foster want with our farms? She asked. Meridian already controls most of the processing plants and distribution networks. Why not just keep squeezing us with their monopoly power? Nathan closed the laptop. Because this isn't just about agriculture. It's about water rights, real estate development, mineral rights, and most importantly, control. He paused, his eyes meeting Emma's with an intensity that startled her. People like Blake believe that wealth gives them the right to reshape the world however they see fit. They see themselves as visionaries and everyone else as either tools to be used or obstacles to be removed. Emma felt a chill at his words, not because they surprised her, but because they articulated what she'd sensed all along about Meridian. And what do you believe? Was she challenged. You're a billionaire too. Former billionaire, Nathan corrected. I put most of my money into a foundation dedicated to fighting corporate consolidation in agriculture. And I believe that wealth comes with responsibility, not entitlement. Ted snorted skeptically. So you're what, the good billionaire? Nathan shook his head. No, I'm someone trying to fix mistakes I've made. I spent years building technology that I thought would help farmers, only to watch it become weaponized against them. Now I'm trying to level the playing field. Emma stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the town square where people still lingered, no doubt gossiping about what had just happened. Why my farm? She asked without turning around. Because you're respected in this community, Nathan replied simply. And because you've been fighting Meridian longer and more effectively than anyone else. You organized the co-op that bypassed their distribution channels. You led the lawsuit against their price fixing. Blake Foster sees you as his biggest obstacle in Harvest Valley. Emma turned surprised. You've done your homework. I have, Nathan acknowledged. And I believe that together, we can do more than save your farm. We can build a model that helps other farmers save theirs. He leaned forward, his voice dropping slightly. But only if you're willing to trust me. Emma studied him, trying to reconcile his expensive clothes and privileged background with the genuine conviction in his eyes. Her instincts had kept the Sullivan farm alive through drought, disease, and economic downturns. Now they were telling her to take a chance. I don't trust you yet, she said finally, but I'm willing to listen to your proposal. Nathan smiled, a real smile this time, not the tight professional one he'd worn earlier. That's all I'm asking for. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim folder. I've drawn up some preliminary ideas. The short version is this. I provide the capital and business connections. You provide the farming expertise and community leadership. We turn the Sullivan farm into both a profitable enterprise and a resource center for other independent farmers. Ted reached for the folder. I'll need to review any documents before Emma signs anything. Of course, Nathan agreed. Take all the time you need. He stood up, extending his hand to Emma. For what it's worth, Miss Sullivan, I believe your father and grandfather would be proud of what you're about to do. Emma froze. How do you know about my father and grandfather? Nathan hesitated, then said quietly, because my family had a farm too once, in Iowa. We lost it to ConAgri when I was 14. My dad didn't survive the foreclosure. The revelation hung in the air between them, an unexpected bridge across their different worlds. Emma took his hand, feeling the smooth skin that had never worked a plow against her calloused palm. Call me Emma, she said, and if you're going to help save my farm, you'd better start learning how it works. Be there at 5 a.m. tomorrow. We start early. I'll be there, Nathan promised. As he left the room, Emma sank back into her chair, her mind racing. She'd just partnered with a stranger, a wealthy outsider with his own agenda. Was she crazy to trust him, even provisionally? Ted voiced the question on her mind. Are you sure about this, Emma? Men like him always have angles we can't see. Emma thought about the map on Nathan's laptop with all those red and yellow properties, families and livelihoods at risk. She thought about her father's voice the day he'd passed the farm to her. This land isn't just soil and crops, Emma. It's a trust. We're caretakers, not owners. I'm not sure of anything, she admitted, but I am sure that Meridian would have destroyed everything my family built. At least this way, we have a fighting chance. Outside the courthouse, Nathan Hargrove stepped into the bright sunlight, loosening his tie as he walked. His phone buzzed and he checked the screen. Blake Foster. With a grimace, he declined the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. The battle lines were being drawn, and he just made the opening move. Now came the hard part, proving to Emma Sullivan and himself that not all wealthy men were cut from the same cloth. As the sun set over Harvest Valley, casting long shadows across fields that had sustained generations, neither Emma nor Nathan could guess how their unlikely alliance would soon shake the foundations of power in America's heartland, or the price they would both pay for challenging men who believed their wealth made them untouchable. Nathan Hargrove had been awake since 4 a.m., but he still arrived at the Sullivan farm 10 minutes late. Emma was already in the barn, her silhouette visible through the open doorway as dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. As Nathan stepped out of his rental car, a sensible SUV rather than the luxury vehicles he normally drove, he felt distinctly out of place. He'd swapped his tailored clothes for what he thought farm work required. New jeans, a flannel shirt, and hiking boots that had never seen mud. The outfit felt like a costume, and judging by the amused glance Emma gave him as he entered the barn, she thought so too. "Morning," she said, hefting a bag of feed over her shoulder with practiced ease. "You're late." "Sorry," Nathan replied, genuinely contrite. "I underestimated the drive from town." Emma nodded toward a row of similar bags. "Make yourself useful." Nathan moved to pick up a bag and nearly staggered under its unexpected weight. He managed to hoist it awkwardly onto his shoulder, determined not to show weakness. Emma watched him struggle for a moment before turning and walking out the back of the barn toward a series of coops where chickens clucked expectantly. "These are our Rhode Island Reds," she explained as she poured feed into troughs. "Best egg layers in the county. We supply most of the local restaurants in the farmers market." Nathan set his bag down with poorly disguised relief and took in the operation. The farm was smaller than he'd expected, about 120 acres according to the property records he'd reviewed, but meticulously maintained. The main house was a 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch, weathered but solid. Besides the barn they stood in, there were several outbuildings, fields in various stages of planting, and an orchard on the eastern slope. "It's beautiful," he said sincerely. Emma's expression softened slightly. "It's home." She finished with the chickens and moved on, assuming Nathan would follow. 5 generations of Sullivans have worked this land. My great-great-grandfather homesteaded it after the Civil War. As they walked through the property, Emma pointed out the different crops: corn, soybeans, and wheat in the larger fields, vegetables in plots closer to the house, the apple and pear orchard that her grandfather had planted. Nathan listened intently, asking questions that surprised her with their insight about soil quality and irrigation systems. "You know more about farming than I expected," she admitted as they paused by the irrigation pond. Nathan shrugged. "I grew up on a farm, remember? And my company started in agricultural technology. I still know the fundamentals." "Knowing isn't the same as doing," Emma countered, but without the edge that had been in her voice earlier. "Theory and practice are worlds apart." "True enough," Nathan conceded. "That's why I'm here. To learn from you." The sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across the fields. In the distance, the sound of a truck engine announced another arrival. "That'll be Miguel," Emma said. "He manages the orchard and helps with everything else. His family has worked with mine for 3 generations. The truck pulled up near the barn, and a weathered man in his 60s climbed out, followed by a younger man who looked to be in his 20s. They both eyed Nathan with undisguised curiosity. "Miguel, Carlos, this is Nathan Hargrove," Emma said. "He's a new investor in the farm." Miguel's eyes narrowed, but he extended a hand. "The man from the auction. News travels fast around here." Nathan shook his hand, noting the strength in the older man's grip. "I'm hoping to learn how things work here. Starting with breakfast, Emma interjected. We've been up for hours and I'm starving. Coming in, gentlemen? The farmhouse kitchen was warm and inviting, with a large wooden table that had clearly hosted countless meals. Emma moved efficiently around the space, preparing a substantial breakfast of eggs, bacon, and biscuits while the men sat somewhat awkwardly at the table. So, Miguel said finally, breaking the silence, what's a tech billionaire want with our little farm? Nathan met the older man's direct gaze. I want to help build something that can stand against corporate consolidation. A model for independent farms to thrive. Miguel exchanged a glance with his son. We've heard big promises before. Meridian said they wanted to partner with local farmers too. Now half the county works for them as hired hands on land their families used to own. I'm not Meridian, Nathan said firmly. No, you wear different clothes, drive different cars, but you're still rich men playing games with our livelihoods. There was no hostility in Miguel's voice, just a matter-of-fact assessment that cut deeper than anger would have. Emma set plates on the table, intervening before Nathan could respond. Miguel's been with the Sullivan farm since my father ran it. If there's anyone who knows this place as well as I do, it's him. Then I have a lot to learn from both of you, Nathan said, accepting the plate Emma handed him. And I know trust has to be earned. The tension in the room eased slightly as they began to eat. The food was simple but delicious, and Nathan realized how hungry he'd become after just a few hours of farm work. The thing you need to understand, Emma said between bites, is that this isn't just about business for us. This land, this community, it's our identity. When Meridian buys a farm, they don't just get the property. They get generations of knowledge, relationships, history. Nathan nodded slowly. And that's what they're really after. Not just the assets, but the control. Exactly, Emma confirmed, looking slightly surprised at his understanding. So if you're serious about helping, you need to be clear about what success looks like. For us, it's not just profit margins. What is it then? Nathan asked. Emma exchanged glances with Miguel and Carlos before answering. Independence, sustainability, knowing that what we build will outlast us. Legacy, Nathan murmured, and something in his tone made Emma study him more carefully. Why did you really step away from your company? She asked. The news articles said it was a difference in strategic direction, but that's corporate talk for something else. Nathan set down his fork, considering how much to share. These people were still essentially strangers, but if they were going to work together, they deserved some truth. Green Tech started with a simple mission: use technology to make farming more efficient and sustainable. We built soil sensors, irrigation systems, predictive models for crop diseases, tools that were supposed to help independent farmers compete. I remember the early marketing, Miguel said. Too expensive for farms our size, but the promise was there. Nathan nodded. As we grew, we took on more investors. One of them was Blake Foster, who eventually became our largest shareholder. He saw different potential in our technology, military applications, surveillance systems, ways to control large agricultural operations remotely. And you disagreed, Emma prompted when he paused. Eventually, Nathan admitted. Not soon enough. I was caught up in the success, the growth. By the time I realized what was happening, Blake had enough board support to push me out. The kitchen fell silent as they absorbed this. Finally, Carlos spoke up for the first time. So this is what, revenge? Nathan met the young man's skeptical gaze. Part of it maybe at first, but it's become something more. A chance to get back to what I originally wanted to build? Emma stood to clear the plates. Well, intentions are nice, but actions matter more. You said you had ideas for the farm. After breakfast, let's hear them. In the farm office, a small room off the kitchen with a desk covered in paperwork, seed catalogs, and a computer that looked at least a decade old, Nathan laid out printouts of his proposal. Emma, Miguel, and Carlos gathered around, expressions ranging from skeptical to curious. The first thing we need to establish is that this is still Emma's farm, Nathan began. I'm proposing a legal structure where I invest capital, but Emma maintains operational control. We'll form an LLC with special provisions protecting her authority and ensuring the farm can't be sold without her consent. Ted, Emma's lawyer cousin, had arrived during breakfast and now picked up the draft agreement, scanning it with narrowed eyes. This is surprisingly favorable to Emma. What's your angle? My angle is that I want this to work, Nathan replied. And it only works if Emma truly leads. He turned to a page showing financial projections. The immediate issue is cash flow. The Sullivan farm has debt from last season's drought, equipment that needs upgrading, and infrastructure repairs. Emma's cheeks flushed slightly. Having her financial struggles laid bare was clearly uncomfortable, but she didn't contradict him. "I'll clear the debt," Nathan continued. "Then we'll invest in 3 areas: equipment modernization, diversification of crops, and direct-to-consumer sales channels to bypass Meridian's processing facilities." "That last part won't be easy," Miguel noted. "Meridian controls most of the distribution networks in the region, which is why we need to build alternatives," Nathan agreed. "Starting with a cooperative model that connects directly to restaurants, grocery stores, and consumers." Emma studied the numbers. "These revenue projections seem optimistic." "They're based on similar models in other regions," Nathan explained, "but they're achievable, especially with your expertise and connections in the community." "And what do you get out of this?" Carlos asked bluntly. Nathan didn't hesitate. 3 things. First, a profitable business partnership. I'm still an investor expecting returns, just on a more reasonable timeline than most venture capitalists. Second, a working laboratory for agricultural technologies my foundation is developing, with your permission and collaboration, of course. And third, a model we can replicate to help other farmers stand against corporate takeovers. Ted looked up from the papers. "This is not what I expected." "It's not charity," Nathan clarified. "It's a different vision of how business can work. One where profit doesn't come at the expense of people and communities." Emma tapped the financial projections. "Even with your investment, we'd be vulnerable if Meridian decides to target us specifically. They could manipulate local prices, pressure suppliers not to work with us." "They will," Nathan said grimly. "Blake Foster doesn't like to lose, and yesterday I embarrassed him publicly." "So we'd be targets," Miguel concluded. "We already are," Emma reminded him. "Meridian wanted this farm for a reason." She turned back to Nathan. "How do we protect ourselves?" "By not fighting alone," Nathan explained, turning to the final page of his presentation. It showed a map of Harvest Valley County with the Sullivan farm at the center and connections radiating outward to other properties. Your farm becomes the hub for a network of independent operators who share resources, knowledge, and market access. Collective defense. Carlos leaned forward, intrigued despite his earlier skepticism. Like the co-op Emma tried to organize last year, but with actual funding. Exactly, Nathan confirmed. Starting with the families who still own their farms, then potentially expanding to help those who want to buy back from Meridian. Emma was quiet for a long moment, studying the materials before her. When she finally spoke, her voice was resolute. "I need to think about this and discuss it with Miguel and Carlos, who've been with this farm through everything." Nathan nodded, gathering his papers. "Of course. Take all the time you need." "In the meantime," Emma added, "if you're serious about learning this operation, the north field needs clearing for planting. Carlos can show you what to do." Carlos raised an eyebrow but stood. "Hope those fancy boots are broken in. It's mostly manual labor today." As Nathan followed the younger man out, he caught a glimpse of Emma and Miguel already deep in conversation, heads bent together over the proposal he'd left. The farm was a world away from the corporate boardrooms he was accustomed to, but the stakes felt just as high, perhaps higher. Here, failure wouldn't just mean lost money or market share. It would mean the end of a family's legacy and a community's way of life. Outside, the morning had warmed considerably. Carlos led Nathan to a shed where they collected tools, work gloves, clippers, and what looked like particularly medieval hand implements for digging. "Emma's testing you," Carlos said as they walked toward the north field. "Seeing if you'll bail when the work gets hard." "I figured that," Nathan replied, adjusting his gloves. Carlos shot him a sidelong glance. "You know, most of the rich guys who come through here, they talk about preserving the rural way of life, like we're some kind of museum exhibit. They don't actually want to get their hands dirty." "I'm not most rich guys," Nathan said simply. "We'll see," Carlos replied, a challenge in his voice. The north field was overgrown with weeds and brush that needed clearing before it could be planted. For the next several hours, Nathan worked alongside Carlos, pulling invasive saplings, clearing brush, and preparing the soil. The work was grueling, and by midday, Nathan's hands were blistered despite the gloves. His back ached, and sweat soaked through his shirt. Carlos worked steadily beside him, occasionally offering terse instructions, but mostly watching with guarded curiosity as the wealthy outsider labored without complaint. As the sun reached its zenith, Carlos finally called for a break, passing Nathan a canteen of water. "You're not completely useless," he conceded, which Nathan suspected was high praise from the taciturn young man. "Thanks," Nathan replied, taking a long drink. "I told you, I grew up doing this kind of work." Yeah, but that was a long time ago, Carlos observed. Before you joined the other side. Nathan paused mid-drink. What do you mean by that? Carlos gestured broadly. People like you, the ones with money and power, you live in a different world than us. You make decisions in boardrooms that destroy places like this, and you never have to see the consequences. That's why I'm here, Nathan said quietly, to see the consequences, to try to fix what I helped break. Carlos studied him for a long moment. My grandfather, Miguel's father, used to say that America has two kinds of rich, the kind that remembers where they came from and the kind that spends their life running from it. He tilted his head. I'm still figuring out which one you are. Before Nathan could respond, the sound of approaching vehicles drew their attention. 3 black SUVs were coming up the farm's main drive, kicking up dust as they approached the house. Carlos tensed. That's not good. No, Nathan agreed, already striding back toward the farmhouse. It's not. They arrived at the yard as the vehicles parked, and several men in expensive suits emerged. At their center was a tall, silver-haired man with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to deference. Nathan recognized him immediately. Blake, he said, stepping forward. Blake Foster's smile was cold as winter. Nathan, working on your tan? Emma emerged from the house, wiping her hands on a towel. Miguel close behind her. This is private property, Mr. Foster. Unless you're here on specific business, I'll have to ask you to leave. Blake turned his attention to her, his smile warming artificially. Ms. Sullivan, I apologize for the unexpected visit. I was simply curious about the new arrangement I've been hearing about. There's nothing to discuss, Emma replied coolly. Oh, I think there is, Blake countered, his gaze returning to Nathan. When one of my oldest friends suddenly turns up outbidding my company at a public auction, then takes up residence on the property he supposedly saved for its original owner. Well, people talk. The Sullivan farm isn't for sale, Nathan stated firmly. To you or anyone else, Blake chuckled. Everything's for sale, Nathan. You taught me that, remember? At Wharton, when you convinced me to invest in your little startup. The reference to their shared history hung in the air, a reminder of connections that ran deeper than business. What do you want, Blake? Nathan asked, cutting to the chase. Just a friendly chat, Blake replied innocently. Perhaps Ms. Sullivan would be kind enough to give us a moment of privacy? Old friends catching up, Emma crossed her arms. Anything you have to say to Mr. Hargrove can be said in front of me. This is my farm. Blake's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course. How about inside then? The him. This heat is brutal for those of us not accustomed to manual labor. The implied condescension wasn't lost on anyone, but after a moment, Emma nodded stiffly. Fine. Follow me. As they moved toward the house, Nathan caught Miguel's eye and saw his concern. Blake Foster didn't make social calls, especially not with an entourage. Something else was happening here. A reconnaissance mission at best, a threat at worst. Inside the farmhouse kitchen, Blake looked around with the air of an anthropologist observing primitive living conditions. His gaze lingered on the family photos on the wall, the worn furniture, the modest appliances. Charming, he said, in a tone that suggested exactly the opposite. So rustic. Emma poured ice water into glasses without asking if anyone wanted any. Say what you came to say, Mr. Foster. Blake accepted the water with a nod of thanks that didn't reach his eyes. Direct. I appreciate that in a businesswoman. He turned to Nathan. You always had an eye for talent. Emma's a lot more than talent, Nathan replied evenly. She's a partner. Is that what they're calling it these days? Blake remarked, his implication clear. Emma's cheeks flushed with anger, but before she could respond, Nathan cut in. You didn't drive out here to insinuate things, Blake. What's your real purpose? Blake set down his glass, all pretense of pleasantry vanishing. Fine. I'll be direct too. Whatever game you're playing, Nathan, it ends now. Meridian has invested millions in consolidating agricultural operations in this region. Your little stunt yesterday was amusing, but meaningless in the grand scheme. It didn't seem meaningless when you raised your bid to $1.2 million, Nathan observed. Blake's jaw tightened. A gesture of respect for an old friend. But make no mistake, this region's future is already determined. Small farms like this are relics, Nathan. Inefficient, outdated, doomed to extinction. Is that what you tell yourself to justify destroying people's livelihoods? Emma interjected, her voice sharp. Blake turned to her with cold eyes. Progress has casualties, Ms. Sullivan. Your family farm is simply on the wrong side of history. And you get to decide that? Emma challenged. A man who's probably never planted a seed in his life? A flash of genuine anger crossed Blake's face before he regained his composure. I decide because I have the capital, the connections, and the vision to transform agriculture for the 21st century. Sentiment and tradition are luxuries the global food system cannot afford. Nathan watched the exchange with growing concern. Blake was revealing more than he typically would, a sign he felt threatened or provoked by their partnership. "What's your actual offer, Blake?" Nathan asked. "You didn't come here just to lecture us on progress." Blake smiled, a predator's smile. "Simple. Walk away, Nathan. Sell me the farm for what you paid, plus a reasonable profit. Return to California and your foundation. Stop meddling in matters you don't understand anymore. And if I don't, then I'll be forced to demonstrate why this quaint vision you're pursuing isn't viable," Blake replied. "Meridian controls enough of the regional infrastructure to make operating independently challenging." "You're threatening them," Emma stated flatly. "I'm stating economic realities," Blake corrected, though his eyes held a warning. "The same realities that forced you to auction your farm in the first place." "Those weren't realities," Nathan countered. "They were deliberate market manipulations. Illegal ones if the evidence my team has been gathering holds up." Something flickered in Blake's expression, surprise perhaps, or concern, before it was replaced by practiced confidence. "Accusations from a disgruntled former business partner won't get much traction, Nathan." "We'll see," Nathan replied evenly. Blake checked his watch, a gesture of dismissal. "I've taken enough of your time. Consider my offer. It won't remain open indefinitely." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Nathan, the board meeting is next month. I'd hate for you to miss your chance to vote your remaining shares, if you still have them by then." With that cryptic parting shot, he left, his entourage following silently behind him. Emma waited until the vehicles had disappeared down the drive before rounding on Nathan. "What did he mean about your shares? What aren't you telling me?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair, his expression troubled. "Most of my wealth is still tied up in green tech stock. I've been liquidating gradually to fund the foundation, but I'm still a major shareholder. And Blake's implying he might find a way to force me to sell before the next board meeting," Nathan explained. "Which would be problematic." "Problematic how?" Emma pressed. Nathan met her gaze directly. "Because I'm planning to use my voting power at that meeting to propose an investigation into green tech's business practices, specifically their collusion with Meridian to pressure independent farmers." Emma's eyes widened as the implication sank in. "So this isn't just about my farm. It's about exposing what Meridian and green tech have been doing all across the country." "It's about both," Nathan insisted. "Your farm is the model for what could be, and you're the partner I need to make it work." Emma was silent for a long moment, processing everything. Finally, she said, "You should have told me I was stepping into a corporate war." "Would you have agreed if I had?" Nathan asked honestly. "Probably not," Emma admitted, "but I deserve the choice." Outside, the sound of Miguel's truck starting up drew their attention. Through the window, they could see him and Carlos heading out to the fields, returning to work despite the confrontation that had just occurred. Life on a farm didn't stop for corporate threats or personal revelations. Emma squared her shoulders, her decision visible in her stance before she spoke. "Your corporate war just became our war," she said firmly. "But from now on, we operate as true partners. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Everything on the table." Nathan nodded, relief evident in his expression. "Agreed. And that starts with you telling me exactly what Blake Foster is capable of," Emma continued, "because the man I just met didn't strike me as someone who accepts defeat gracefully." "He isn't," Nathan confirmed grimly. "And what you just saw was only the beginning." As the sun beat down on the Sullivan farm, two worlds had collided, one of corporate boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, the other of soil and sweat and generations of stewardship. The battle for America's heartland had only just begun, and caught in the middle were an unlikely pair, a farmer fighting for her heritage and a wealthy tech entrepreneur seeking redemption. Neither could guess how far their enemies would go to destroy what they were building, or what they would need to sacrifice to protect it. The next 3 weeks transformed the Sullivan farm. With Nathan's capital infusion, long-postponed repairs became possible, equipment was upgraded, and a sense of cautious optimism began to replace the resignation that had settled over the property in recent years. Emma watched from the porch as Nathan directed the installation of new irrigation systems in the eastern fields. His shirt sleeves rolled up, hands gesturing as he explained something to the contractor. Despite her initial skepticism, she had to admit he wasn't afraid of work. Every morning he arrived before sunrise. Every evening he stayed until the day's tasks were completed. His hands, once smooth, now bore calluses and cuts. His fair skin had reddened, peeled, and finally tanned under the relentless summer sun. More surprising was how quickly he'd absorbed the rhythms and requirements of farm life. He asked intelligent questions, remembered the answers, and adapted his technology-focused mindset to the unpredictable realities of agriculture. There were still moments of culture clash, like when he'd suggested scheduling the harvest with precision timing, only to have Miguel laugh and point at the sky, reminding him that nature set the schedule here, not spreadsheets. But those moments were becoming less frequent. Coffee? Miguel appeared beside her, offering a steaming mug. Emma accepted it gratefully. Thanks. How's Carlos doing with the new tractor? Like a kid with a toy, Miguel replied with a rare smile. That machine does in an hour what used to take us a day. Nathan seems to know his equipment, Emma observed, nodding toward where he stood in the field. Miguel followed her gaze. He does. But more importantly, he listens. Most outsiders come in thinking they know better than those of us who've worked the land our whole lives. He's still an outsider, Emma reminded him, though the words lacked the edge they would have held weeks earlier. For now, Miguel agreed. He sipped his coffee, then added casually, the Rodriguez family called this morning. They want to meet about joining the co-op. Emma turned to him in surprise. Frank Rodriguez? I thought Meridian had him locked into an exclusive contract. They do, Miguel confirmed. But after what happened at your auction, people are talking, wondering if there might be another way. Hope flickered in Emma's chest, but she tamped it down, wary of disappointment. One meeting doesn't mean they'll join us. No, Miguel conceded, but it's a start. As they spoke, a familiar truck appeared on the long driveway leading to the farm. Emma recognized it as belonging to her cousin Ted, who'd been reviewing Nathan's proposed legal structure for their partnership. She'd been waiting anxiously for his assessment, knowing that despite the progress on the farm, nothing was official until contracts were signed. Ted parked and climbed out, clutching his briefcase, his expression unreadable. Nathan, noticing the arrival, excused himself from the contractor and made his way toward the house. Morning, Ted, Emma called. You're just in time for coffee. Ted nodded, climbing the porch steps. Attends, Ornan, I could use some. Been up half the night going through these documents? They settled around the kitchen table, Ted spreading papers before them as Emma poured coffee. Nathan arrived, wiping his hands on a bandana before taking a seat across from Ted. So? Emma prompted when Ted remained silent. Ted removed his glasses, polishing them slowly, a habit when he was choosing his words carefully. I've gone through every page, every clause, every appendix. Had colleagues with more corporate experience review it as well. He paused, then looked directly at Nathan. It's the most equitable partnership agreement between a capital provider and a land operator that I've ever seen. Relief washed over Emma, though she tried not to show it. No hidden traps? No fine print giving him control? None, Ted confirmed. The provisions protecting your operational authority are ironclad. The right of first refusal if he ever wants to sell his stake. The profit-sharing formula is weighted in your favor for the first 5 years. Even the technology licensing agreements ensure that any innovations developed here remain partially owned by Sullivan Farm, not just by Nathan's foundation. Nathan remained quiet, letting Ted's assessment speak for itself. So you're saying I should sign, Emma concluded. Ted replaced his glasses. As your lawyer, yes. But as your cousin, he hesitated. Emma, you need to understand what you're walking into. I did some digging into Meridian and Blake Foster. They play hardball, and I mean the kind where the ball is wrapped around a brick. We've already had a taste of that, Emma replied, thinking of Blake's visit. That was just the opening move, Ted warned. Meridian has sued farmers who wouldn't sell. They've pressured banks to call in loans early. They've bought water rights and cut off access. And that's just what's documented, which is why we need to move quickly, Nathan interjected. Every day we wait gives Blake more time to prepare his next move. Ted turned his attention to Nathan. And what exactly is your plan when things get ugly? Because Emma's not just risking a business investment here. This is her home, her heritage. Nathan met Ted's gaze steadily. The plan has 3 phases. First, strengthen the Sullivan Farm operations to make it financially resilient. Second, build the co-op network to create collective leverage against Meridian's monopoly power. Third, use the evidence my team has been gathering to launch legal challenges against their anti-competitive practices. That third part is where I get nervous, Ted admitted. You're picking a fight with people who have very deep pockets and very few scruples. We're not picking a fight, Emma corrected. We're defending ourselves against one that was already started when Meridian decided to target family farms. Ted sighed. Just be sure you know what you're signing up for. Both of you. After a moment of silence, Emma reached for a pen. Where do I sign? The news spread quickly through Harvest Valley. By nightfall, Emma's phone was buzzing constantly with messages from neighbors, friends, and fellow farmers. Some offered congratulations on saving the farm. Others expressed skepticism about her partnership with an outsider. A few, those already working for Meridian, sent warnings about the consequences of crossing Blake Foster. Nathan suggested they use the moment to make a public statement, to formally announce the partnership and their vision for a cooperative network. Emma agreed, and they decided to host a gathering at the farm that weekend. Not just an announcement, Emma said as they planned the event, a working session. If people are going to join us, they need to see that this is real, not just talk. On Saturday morning, the Sullivan farm welcomed over 50 visitors, farmers and their families, local business owners, even the editor of the Harvest Valley Gazette. Emma had prepared a simple lunch of sandwiches and homemade lemonade, setting up tables under the sprawling oak trees near the house. Nathan watched her move through the crowd, greeting everyone by name, listening to concerns, answering questions. This was her element: community, connection, the intricate web of relationships that sustain rural life. He felt a twinge of admiration, recognizing social skills that mirrored his own in business settings, but were grounded in something more authentic. Quite a turnout, Carlos observed, appearing beside Nathan with a plate of food. More than we expected. People are curious, Nathan replied. They want to see the odd couple for themselves. Carlos snorted. You mean the farmer and the billionaire? Yeah, you're definitely the main attraction. Before Nathan could respond, Emma called for everyone's attention. The crowd quieted, gathering around where she stood on the porch steps. Thank you all for coming, she began. Most of you know what happened at the auction 3 weeks ago. What you might not know is what's happened since. She gestured to Nathan, who joined her on the steps. Together, they explained their partnership, the structure that preserved the Sullivan farm's independence while providing capital for modernization, and their vision for a cooperative that would give independent farmers collective strength against corporate consolidation. This isn't charity, Nathan emphasized when it was his turn to speak. And it's not a takeover. It's a genuine partnership based on a simple belief that family farms are not obsolete, that with the right support and structure, they can be more innovative, more sustainable, and ultimately more profitable than corporate factory farms. A weathered farmer in the back called out, "Fine words, but Meridian already controls most of the county. How do you plan to compete with their prices?" By changing the game, Emma answered. Right now, Meridian forces us to sell commodities at rock-bottom prices, then adds the value themselves through processing and distribution. Our co-op will let us capture that value directly, through shared processing facilities and direct sales channels to restaurants, grocers, and consumers. Sounds expensive, another voice commented skeptically. It is, Nathan acknowledged. That's where my investment comes in. The Sullivan farm is the pilot, but my foundation has committed funds to help other farms join the network. With what strings attached? The question came from Frank Rodriguez, whose interest Miguel had mentioned earlier. Reasonable ones, Nathan replied. Commitment to sustainable practices. Participation in the co-op's governance. A small percentage of profits to fund further expansion. But no control over your land or operations, Frank crossed his arms. Meridian won't just stand by while you build this. They've already warned those of us under contract not to attend today. A murmur ran through the crowd. Several people glanced around nervously, as if expecting Meridian representatives to appear. Which is exactly why we need to stand together, Emma said firmly. Alone, none of us can match Meridian's resources. Together, we have a fighting chance. The gathering shifted into smaller discussion groups after the formal presentation. Nathan moved among them, answering detailed questions about financing, technology, and legal protections. He noticed that despite the interest, many farmers remained hesitant, waiting to see who would commit first. By late afternoon, as people began to leave, Nathan and Emma retreated to the porch to assess the response. What do you think? Nathan asked. Are they with us? Emma shook her head slightly. They're interested but scared, and I don't blame them. Frank's right. Meridian will retaliate against anyone who joins us. So we need to show them it's worth the risk, Nathan concluded. Demonstrate that the model works. Exactly, Emma agreed. Praying no word, Talk is cheap. Results matter. As she spoke, a sleek black car turned into the driveway. Not one of Meridian's SUVs, but a luxury sedan with tinted windows. It parked, and a woman emerged, dressed in an expensive suit that looked out of place among the pickup trucks and practical attire of the departing farmers. Nathan stiffened, recognizing her instantly. "Diana," Emma glanced at him questioningly. "You know her?" "Diana Winters," Nathan explained quickly. "Green Tech's head of public relations. And Blake's—" he hesitated. "Girlfriend? Wife?" Emma prompted. "Allie," Nathan settled on, "and one of the sharpest minds in corporate communications. If she's here, Blake is worried." Diana approached with confident strides, her high heels somehow navigating the gravel path without difficulty. Her smile was professional but cold. "Nathan," she greeted him. "Quite the rural reinvention you've got going here." "Diana," Nathan replied neutrally. "What brings you to Harvest Valley?" "Professional courtesy," Diana answered, turning her attention to Emma. Miss Sullivan, I presume?" "Diana Winters, Green Tech Industries. May I have a moment of your time?" "Both of you?" Emma hesitated, then nodded, leading them inside to the privacy of the kitchen. Diana declined the offer of refreshments, placing a slim folder on the table instead. "I'll be direct," she began. Today's gathering has attracted attention. While Mr. Foster respects your right to explore business opportunities, there's concern about potential misrepresentations being made regarding Meridian Agricultural Holdings." "Misrepresentations?" Emma repeated. Diana opened the folder, revealing printouts of what appeared to be legal documents. Specifically, any suggestion that Meridian has engaged in anti-competitive practices or market manipulation. Such claims are not only false but potentially actionable. "Is that a threat?" Emma asked bluntly. "A clarification," Diana corrected smoothly, along with a reminder that many farmers in this region are contractually bound to exclusivity agreements with Meridian. Encouraging them to violate those agreements could constitute tortious interference with business relationships. Nathan leaned forward. "Interesting approach, Diana. Usually Blake sends lawyers for this kind of message." "Consider it a professional courtesy from one former colleague to another," Diana replied, her tone softening fractionally. "Things don't have to become adversarial, Nathan. There's room for cooperative approaches that benefit everyone." "Like what?" Emma asked skeptically. Diana turned her attention back to Emma. "Meridian would be prepared to discuss a strategic partnership with the Sullivan farm. One that preserves your operational independence while providing access to our distribution networks and processing facilities. Mr. Foster authorized me to present this preliminary offer." She slid another document across the table. Nathan recognized the format immediately. A standard Meridian contract, the same kind that had trapped dozens of farmers in exploitative relationships. "This is the same deal you've used to squeeze every independent farmer in the region?" Nathan observed. "The terms look favorable up front, but the escalator clauses and performance requirements make it a slow-motion takeover." Diana's smile tightened. "And I'm sure Ms. Sullivan is capable of evaluating business opportunities for herself." "I am," Emma confirmed, pushing the document back without opening it. "And I'm not interested in any partnership with Meridian. We've seen what happens to farms that go down that road." Diana accepted the rejection with a slight nod. "As you wish, but the offer remains open for now." She gathered her materials, then paused. "One last thing. There have been rumors about allegations regarding Meridian's business practices possibly being raised at Green Tech's upcoming board meeting. Mr. Foster wanted me to assure you, Nathan, that such a course would be unproductive for all involved." The implication was clear. Blake knew about Nathan's plans and was preparing to counter them. "Thank you for the visit, Diana," Nathan said, standing to signal the end of the conversation. "Please give Blake my regards." After Diana left, Emma turned to Nathan, her expression troubled. "They're watching us closely." "Yes," Nathan agreed grimly. "And that visit wasn't just a warning. It was reconnaissance, to assess how serious we are, how much support we have, and to remind us how powerful they are," Emma added. "The legal threats weren't subtle," Nathan nodded. "Blake's building a case against us while trying to neutralize the one I'm building against him. Classic corporate warfare tactics." Emma moved to the window, watching Diana's car disappear down the driveway. "This isn't a corporate boardroom, Nathan. This is my home, my community. These are real people's lives at stake." "I know," Nathan said quietly, "which is why we can't afford to lose." The next morning, Emma woke to the sound of her phone buzzing insistently. The caller ID showed Frank Rodriguez, the farmer who'd asked the pointed question at yesterday's gathering. "Frank?" Emma answered, still half asleep. What's wrong? Frank's voice was tight with anger and fear. They're cutting us off, Emma. Meridian just canceled all delivery contracts with farms that attended your meeting yesterday. No pickups, no processing, effective immediately. Emma sat up, instantly alert. They can't do that. You have contracts. Check the fine print, Frank replied bitterly. There's a clause about competitive activities they're using as justification. Emma, I've got 3,000 gallons of milk that needs to be moved today, or it spoils. Every dairy farm that was at your place is in the same boat. Emma's mind raced. How many farms are affected? At least 8 dairy operations that I know of, Frank answered. Probably more by the end of the day. I'll call you back in 15 minutes, Emma promised, already dialing Nathan's number as she ended the call with Frank. Nathan answered immediately. I just heard. Blake didn't waste any time. We need to move those dairy products today, Emma said without preamble, and find alternative processing for at least 8 farms. I'm already on it, Nathan replied, working on chartering refrigerated trucks from the nearest independent hauler. But we need somewhere to take the milk, Emma thought quickly. Peterson's Creamery in Millfield. They're small but independent. I know the owner. They might have capacity if we can get the milk there. Make the call, Nathan instructed. I'll handle transportation. And Emma, this is just the beginning. Blake's going to target everyone who showed interest yesterday. We need to be ready to help them all, or no one else will risk joining us. By noon, a fleet of chartered trucks was crisscrossing Harvest Valley, collecting milk from the affected dairy farms. Emma had convinced Peterson's Creamery to accept the deliveries, though they could only handle about 60% of the volume. For the rest, Nathan had arranged emergency sales to independent cheese producers and small processors in neighboring counties, at reduced prices, but enough to prevent a total loss. The Sullivan farm became a makeshift coordination center, with Emma and Nathan working phones nonstop, Miguel and Carlos directing trucks, and affected farmers arriving throughout the day for updates and assistance. By sunset, they'd managed to save most of the dairy products, though at significant cost in reduced prices and transportation expenses. We can't keep doing this indefinitely, Emma admitted as she and Nathan finally took a break on the porch, watching the last truck depart. We don't have the infrastructure or capacity. No, Nathan agreed, but this crisis has made one thing clear. We need our own processing facilities much sooner than we planned. Emma looked at him in surprise. That would take millions. Yes, Nathan confirmed, and it's exactly the investment we need to make. Blake just showed his hand. He's going to use his control of processing and distribution to strangle any farm that works with us. So we need to build an alternative system from farm to consumer. That's a massive undertaking, Emma cautioned. It is, Nathan acknowledged. But we've just demonstrated what's possible when we work together. Every farmer who was helped today is now personally invested in our success. As if on cue, Frank Rodriguez's truck pulled into the driveway. He approached the porch, exhaustion evident in his face but determination in his stance. You saved our farm today, he said without preamble. Meridian thought they could force us to dump that milk and teach everyone a lesson about crossing them. We're glad we could help, Emma replied. But this was just emergency response. We need a sustainable solution, Frank nodded. That's why I'm here. I talked to the other dairy farmers on the way home. We're ready to commit to your co-op, formally, contractually, if you'll still have us after the trouble we brought down. The trouble came from Meridian, not you, Nathan pointed out. And yes, we want you with us, but you should understand what you're signing up for. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Frank's expression hardened. I've worked for Meridian for 3 years under their partnership contract. Every year their requirements go up, our profits go down, and we have less control of our own farm. I'd rather fight and risk losing than continue that slow death. Emma glanced at Nathan, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. Blake's heavy-handed tactics had achieved the opposite of his intention. Instead of frightening farmers away from the co-op, he'd pushed them toward it. We'll draw up the agreements tomorrow, Emma told Frank, and start working on a permanent solution for processing. After Frank left, Emma and Nathan remained on the porch as darkness fell over the farm. The day's crisis had temporarily pushed aside the tension that sometimes lingered between them. The fundamental differences in their backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives. For these hours, they'd been simply partners in a common cause, their skills complementing each other perfectly. We had company today, Nathan mentioned, breaking the comfortable silence. Why? While you were on the phone with Peterson's, a photographer pretending to be a lost tourist. Carlos spotted him taking pictures of the farm, The trucks, everyone coming and going. Emma frowned. Meridian surveillance? Almost certainly, Nathan confirmed. Diana's visit yesterday was to gauge our intentions. Today was about documenting our response to their pressure tactics. Why would they bother photographing us? Nathan's expression grew serious. Building a narrative, one that they can control. We should expect a PR offensive next. Stories in local media questioning our motives, highlighting any problems or setbacks, painting me as an outsider disrupting the local economy, and you as... He hesitated. As what? Emma prompted. As someone being manipulated by a wealthy outsider, Nathan finished reluctantly. Blake knows how to exploit social divisions. Class, urban versus rural, outsider versus local. It's part of his playbook. Emma absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. So we need our own narrative. One that tells the truth about what we're building. Exactly, Nathan agreed. And it needs to come primarily from you, not me. You have the credibility here that I don't. I'm not good at publicity, Emma admitted. I'm a farmer, not a spokesperson. You're better than you think, Nathan countered. I saw you yesterday connecting with everyone, explaining our vision. You speak their language in a way I never could. Emma wasn't convinced, but she nodded. I'll try, but I need you to teach me how this PR game works. I'm used to straightforward problems. Broken equipment, bad weather, fluctuating prices. Corporate manipulation is new territory. Deal, Nathan agreed. He hesitated, then added, there's something else we should discuss. Today was expensive. The trucks, the discounted sales, the staff time. We'll need to formalize a crisis fund for the co-op, establish response protocols. How bad was it? Emma asked directly. About $200,000, Nathan admitted. Worth every penny for what it accomplished, but not sustainable as a regular occurrence. Emma whistled softly. That's a lot of money to most of us, even if it's pocket change to you. It's not pocket change, Nathan corrected. I've invested most of my liquid assets in this project. What remains is largely tied up in green tech stock that I can't sell quickly without driving down the price and losing voting power before the board meeting. This revelation surprised Emma. She'd assumed Nathan's resources were essentially unlimited. Are you saying you could run out of money? If Blake forces us to fight on enough fronts simultaneously, yes, Nathan acknowledged, which is exactly his strategy. He knows I'm committed here, so he's going to try to bleed us dry before we can establish a sustainable operation. The admission of vulnerability shifted something in Emma's perception of their partnership. Until now, she'd seen herself as the one with everything to lose, while Nathan risked only money he could afford to spend. The reality was more complicated and more balanced than she'd realized. Then we need to be smart about our resources, she concluded. Prioritize investments that generate revenue quickly. Build the co-op's capacity for self-sufficiency. Nathan nodded, relieved by her practical response. That's exactly right, and we need to move fast. Blake won't wait to escalate. As if summoned by his words, Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Ted. Check the Harvest Valley Gazette website. Now, Emma pulled up the local news site on her phone, Nathan leaning in to read over her shoulder. The headline made them both freeze. Tech billionaire's agricultural experiment raises concerns. Local farmers face backlash after Silicon Valley entrepreneur disrupts markets. The article beneath was a masterpiece of insinuation and selective facts. It described the day's events not as Meridian's retaliation, but as market disruption caused by outside investment. It quoted anonymous industry experts warning about unsustainable business models and risky ventures backed by Silicon Valley money with no understanding of agricultural realities. Most damaging were selective quotes from farmers who hadn't attended their gathering, expressing concern about elites playing games with local livelihoods. There was even a photograph, taken that afternoon without their knowledge, of Nathan on his phone while surrounded by worried-looking farmers. The caption read, "Nathan Hargrove directs operations at Sullivan Farm amid growing concerns about his influence in the local agricultural community." That was fast, Emma remarked, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach, and completely distorted. "This is Diana's work," Nathan confirmed grimly. "She's one of the best in the business at shaping narratives." Emma scrolled through the article again, noting how skillfully it played on local sensitivities about outsiders, wealth, and corporate influence. Precisely the concerns many had about Meridian, now being redirected toward Nathan and their partnership. We need to respond, she decided, already composing a statement in her mind. Not tonight, Nathan cautioned. They want us to react emotionally, defensively. We need a strategic response, not just a denial. Emma recognized the wisdom in his advice, though the misrepresentations in the article made her blood boil. Anar, cut it tomorrow then. I'll call a meeting with the farmers who've committed to the co-op. We'll craft a response together, from community voices, not just you and me. Nathan nodded approval. Perfect approach. Meanwhile, I'll start making calls about financing for those processing facilities. Blake just accelerated our timeline considerably. As they finalized plans for the next day, Emma felt a strange mixture of anger and exhilaration. The lines were clearly drawn now, the conflict in the open. Meridian had shown its tactics, and while they were certainly formidable, they weren't invincible. You know, she said as Nathan prepared to leave for the night, my grandfather used to say that when you're plowing a field, you have to pick a distant point and steer straight toward it. If you keep looking over your shoulder, your furrows end up crooked. Nathan smiled at the farming metaphor. Wise man. He also said, Emma continued, that the only time you truly know the character of your neighbors is when a storm comes and everyone has to decide whether to help each other or save themselves. And which are we seeing now? Nathan asked. Emma gazed out at the darkened fields, thinking of Frank Rodriguez's determination, the dairy farmers who'd rallied together, even the concerned calls she'd received after the article appeared online. Both, she answered honestly, but more of the former than Blake Foster expected, I think. He doesn't understand that around here, people have long memories for those who helped them and those who hurt them. As Nathan drove away, Emma remained on the porch, watching his taillights disappear down the long driveway. 3 weeks ago, she'd been resigned to losing everything. Now she was at the center of a movement that could either save or completely destroy her farm and many others. The risks were enormous, but for the first time in years, she felt something that had been missing, purpose beyond mere survival. Inside, she spread a map of Harvest Valley County on the kitchen table, marking the farms that had committed to the co-op and those still on the fence. Then she began listing resources, vulnerabilities, potential allies. Blake Foster might have wealth, corporate power, and sophisticated tactics on his side, but Emma had generations of connection to this land and its people. The battle for America's heartland would be fought not just with capital and contracts, but with those deeper bonds of community and shared history. As midnight approached, Emma finally went to bed, exhausted but resolute. Tomorrow would bring new challenges from Meridian, no doubt, but also the first real steps toward building an alternative to their control. The seeds of resistance had been planted, and despite the rocky soil and gathering storms, they were beginning to take root. The Sullivan Farm Cooperative grew faster than anyone anticipated. Within 2 weeks of the dairy crisis, 17 farms had formally joined, with another dozen seriously considering membership. What Blake Foster had intended as a warning had instead become a catalyst, galvanizing the community around a common threat in a shared vision of independence. Emma stood in what had once been her grandfather's storage barn, now transformed into the co-op's headquarters. Computer workstations line one wall, staffed by local college students tracking shipments, orders, and member communications. A large digital map displayed the locations of member farms, processing facilities, and distribution routes. In the center of the space, farmers gathered around tables discussing planting schedules, equipment sharing, and marketing strategies. The energy in the room was palpable, a mixture of determination, hope, and the nervous excitement that comes with building something new and untested. Emma felt a surge of pride as she watched Carlos lead a training session on the co-op's new inventory management system, which he'd helped design. "Quite the operation you've built here," a voice observed from behind her. Emma turned to find Nathan watching the activity with obvious satisfaction. He'd been away for 3 days, meeting with potential investors and allies in Chicago, and she was surprised by how glad she felt to see him. "We've built," she corrected him. "None of this would exist without your backing." Nathan shook his head slightly. "The money helped, but this," he gestured to the farmers working together, the sense of purpose animating the space. "This is about leadership and community. That's what you bring." Before Emma could respond, Miguel approached, clipboard in hand. "The Peterson Creamery contract is ready for review," he told them. "They've agreed to dedicate 60% of their capacity to co-op members, with an option to expand if we help finance new equipment." "Perfect," Emma replied. "That solves our immediate dairy processing needs. What about the vegetables and grain storage? That's why I'm here, Nathan said, setting his travel bag on a nearby desk and pulling out a folder. I think I found our solution. He spread architectural drawings across one of the planning tables. Emma and Miguel leaned in to examine them. The old Westfield cannery, Nathan explained. It's been closed for 3 years since Conagri consolidated operations in their mega facility in Nebraska. The buildings are solid, the location is central to our member farms, and most importantly, it has existing permits for food processing that would take months to obtain for a new facility. Emma studied the plans, excitement building. How much? $4 million for the property, Nathan replied. Another 2 to 3 for renovations and new equipment. Miguel whistled low. That's serious money. It is, Nathan acknowledged, but it solves multiple problems at once. Processing for vegetables, storage for grain, and eventually packaging and distribution all in one location. Can we afford it? Emma asked directly, aware of Nathan's earlier warnings about financial constraints. Yes, with careful structuring, Nathan answered. The foundation will provide half as an investment. For the rest, I've arranged a consortium of impact investors who support sustainable agriculture. They're offering favorable terms secured by the property itself rather than member farms. Emma exchanged a look with Miguel, who gave a slight nod of approval. Let's bring it to the full membership, she decided. If they approve, how quickly can we move? We could close within 3 weeks, Nathan replied. Renovations would take another 2 months, but we could begin limited operations almost immediately. Just in time for the main harvest, Miguel noted. Exactly, Nathan confirmed. That's not coincidental. Blake will be expecting us to struggle with processing this season. This gives us a fighting chance to prove the model works. Emma was about to respond when the door opened and Ted hurried in, his expression troubled. Conversations quieted as people sensed the tension in his arrival. What's wrong? Emma asked, moving to meet him. Ted handed her a legal document. Meridian just filed suit against the co-op and 8 member farms, including Sullivan Farm. They're claiming anti-competitive practices, tortious interference with their contracts, and misappropriation of trade secrets. A ripple of concern spread through the room as farmers gathered around. On what grounds? Nathan asked, already reaching for the document. The trade secrets claim is bogus, Ted explained. They're alleging that farmers who left Meridian's contracts are using proprietary agricultural techniques. The interference claim is based on our helping farms that had existing relationships with Meridian. Emma scanned the lawsuit, her jaw tightening. This is harassment. They know these claims won't hold up. They don't need to win, Nathan pointed out grimly. They just need to drain our resources and scare potential members away. He turned to the gathered farmers. This is a standard corporate tactic, using the legal system as a weapon. The lawsuit itself becomes the punishment, regardless of merit. Frank Rodriguez pushed to the front of the group. So what do we do? I can't afford a legal battle with Meridian. None of us can. You won't have to, Nathan assured him. The co-op will provide legal representation for all named members. My foundation has already retained a top agricultural law firm that specializes in fighting corporate consolidation cases. The tension in the room eased slightly, but Emma noted the worried expressions that remained. Lawsuits meant uncertainty, stress, and potential financial ruin for families already operating on thin margins. Let's be clear about what's happening, she said, her voice carrying across the now quiet room. Meridian sees us succeeding, and they're scared. First, they tried economic pressure with the dairy contracts. When that backfired, they moved to legal intimidation. These are not the actions of a company that believes we'll fail on our own. These are desperate moves to stop something they see as a genuine threat. Her words had the intended effect. Backs straightened, expressions hardened with resolve rather than fear. Emma's right, Nathan added. And there's something else you should know. He nodded to Ted, who distributed copies of another document. This is our counter-suit against Meridian, which we'll file tomorrow. We're alleging anti-competitive practices, price manipulation, and violation of federal agricultural fair practice regulations. Do we have a case? Someone asked. Strong one, Nathan confirmed. We've been gathering evidence for months. Testimony from farmers who were squeezed out. Internal documents showing deliberate market manipulation. Data on price disparities across regions where Meridian has different levels of control. Emma studied Nathan as he outlined the legal strategy. This was yet another side of him she hadn't fully appreciated. His corporate experience had equipped him to anticipate and counter Blake Foster's tactics in ways she never could have. Their different backgrounds, which had seemed a liability at first, were proving to be their greatest strength as partners. The legal battles are important, Emma added, but they're not where this war will be won. While the lawyers fight in court, we need to focus on what we do best: growing food, supporting each other, and building a better alternative to Meridian's model of agriculture. The meeting shifted to practical matters after that, reviewing the cannery proposal, adjusting planting schedules to meet direct contracts Emma had secured with restaurants and grocers, coordinating equipment sharing to maximize efficiency. By the time farmers began to depart, the sense of purpose had returned, though tempered with a new awareness of the challenges ahead. Nathan and Emma remained in the headquarters barn after others had left, reviewing the lawsuit more carefully with Ted and planning their response. As night fell, Ted gathered his papers and headed home, leaving them alone. "You're good at this," Nathan observed as Emma closed her laptop, rubbing tired eyes. "At what?" "Leadership," he replied. "Keeping people focused on the larger goal when obstacles appear." "It's a rare quality," Emma shrugged off the compliment. "It's just farm sense. You learn early that there's always a crisis: weather, pests, equipment breakdowns. You can't let each one derail you." "It's more than that," Nathan insisted. "You give people something to believe in, not just a business plan." Emma was uncomfortable with the praise, but something in Nathan's sincere admiration made her pause rather than dismiss it. "Maybe we both bring something essential," she conceded. "Your strategic thinking and my farm sense." Nathan smiled at her adoption of the term. "Together we make one competent leader." The moment of warmth was interrupted by the buzz of Nathan's phone. He checked the screen, his expression immediately darkening. "What is it?" Emma asked. "Green Tech's board has moved up the meeting," he replied, showing her the formal notification. "To next week. Blake's outmaneuvering me, trying to force a vote before our countersuit becomes public. Can you be ready that soon?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair, calculating rapidly. I'll have to be. If Blake gets the board to block my proposal for an investigation, or worse, forces me to liquidate my shares, we lose a critical lever against Meridian." "Then you need to leave for California immediately," Emma concluded. "Yes," Nathan agreed reluctantly. "The cannery closing is in good hands with Ted overseeing it. The legal team knows what to do with the countersuit. But the board meeting?" He hesitated. "Emma, Blake won't just be fighting my proposal. He'll be prepared to discredit me personally, to paint everything we're doing here as the misguided crusade of a resentful ex-CEO." Emma understood the implications immediately. "He'll use me, us, the co-op, as evidence that you've lost your business judgment." "Exactly," Nathan confirmed. "The tech world sees agriculture as hopelessly old-fashioned, low margin, a dead end compared to artificial intelligence or biotechnology. To them, my choice to invest here looks like either sentimentality or spite." "And what is it?" Emma asked, meeting his gaze directly. Nathan considered the question seriously. "It started as both, if I'm honest. Emotional connection to farming, anger at what Blake had done to my company. But it's become something else, something I believe in completely." He gestured to the space around them, the physical manifestation of their vision. "This model works, Emma. It's not just competitive with corporate agriculture, it's better, more resilient, more innovative, more humane." The conviction in his voice stirred something in Emma, pride in what they'd built together, and a deeper emotion she wasn't ready to examine. "Then go to California and make them see that," she said firmly. "I can handle things here for a few days." Nathan nodded, gathering his belongings. "I'll call when I land. And Emma," he paused at the door, "thank you for trusting me when you had every reason not to." After he left, Emma remained in the headquarters, the quiet hum of computers the only sound. She should have been exhausted, but adrenaline and anxiety kept her alert. Something about the timing of events, the lawsuit, the accelerated board meeting, suggested coordination that went beyond normal corporate tactics. On impulse, she opened her laptop again and began searching for news about Green Tech and Meridian. Most of the results were standard business reporting, quarterly results, market analyses, executive profiles. But one item caught her attention: a small announcement from 3 months earlier about a joint venture between Green Tech and Meridian to develop next-generation agricultural surveillance systems. Emma frowned, copying the link and sending it to Nathan with a simple message. "Did you know about this?" His response came quickly. "No, this is new and concerning. We'll investigate when I reach CA." Emma continued digging, finding more connections between the companies than should exist between supposed competitors. Cross-investments, shared board members, joint lobbying efforts. The picture emerging was one of strategic alignment rather than rivalry, except where Nathan was concerned. Her phone rang, a Chicago area code she didn't recognize. Warily, she answered. "Emma Sullivan?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. Who's this?" "My name is Sophia Chen. I'm a reporter with the Midwest Agricultural Digest. I'm working on a story about consolidation in farming and heard about your cooperative. I'd like to interview you about what you're building there." Emma hesitated, media-shy by nature, and even more cautious after the hatchet job in the local paper. "How did you hear about us?" "Multiple sources," Sophia replied. "The lawsuit Meridian filed is public record. But more interesting to me is what you're doing with direct-to-consumer sales channels and your planned acquisition of the Westfield Cannery." The mention of the cannery, which wasn't yet public knowledge, set off alarm bells. "I'll need to verify who you are before discussing any of this," Emma said carefully. "Of course," Sophia agreed readily. "I can send credentials, previous articles, but I should mention that I'm working on a tight deadline, and Meridian has already provided their perspective. I'd like to give you the opportunity to present yours." The classic journalistic pressure tactic suggests that a story is running with or without your input. Emma had seen it before, but the statement about Meridian giving their perspective concerned her. What narrative were they pushing? "Email me your credentials," Emma instructed. "If everything checks out, we can talk tomorrow." After hanging up, Emma immediately called Ted, waking him from an early bedtime. She explained the situation and asked him to verify the reporter's identity. "Even if she's legitimate, be careful," Ted warned. "With the lawsuit pending, anything you say could be used against us." "I know," Emma assured him. "But if Meridian is already spinning their version of events, we need our side represented too." After ending the call with Ted, Emma locked up the headquarters and walked the short distance to her house, the night air cool against her skin. The farm was quiet under a canopy of stars, the peace of the scene at odds with the turbulence of recent events. On her porch sat a small package that hadn't been there earlier. No shipping label, no return address, just a plain brown box secured with tape. Emma approached it cautiously, a lifetime of rural awareness making her wary of unexpected deliveries. Using her pocket knife, she carefully cut the tape and opened the box, prepared to drop it at the first sign of anything suspicious. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. "Evidence you'll need. From someone inside who can't stay silent anymore." Emma stared at the items, her heart racing. This could be anything. Legitimate whistleblower evidence, corrupted files designed to damage their systems, even something that could be used to claim they had indeed stolen trade secrets, as Meridian alleged. She took a photo of the note and the drive, then texted it to Nathan along with an explanation of how she'd found it. His response was immediate and emphatic. "Do not connect that to any of our systems. Wait until I can arrange for secure analysis." Emma agreed, securing the drive and note in her safe. Whatever was on it, help or harm, would have to wait. But the mysterious delivery reinforced her growing certainty that their struggle against Meridian was connected to larger, hidden conflicts that Nathan hadn't fully explained. Inside her house, Emma poured a rare glass of whiskey and sat at her kitchen table, the events of the day swirling in her mind. The cooperative was growing beyond anything she'd imagined, becoming a movement rather than just a business alliance. The lawsuit, while concerning, was also validation that they posed a real threat to Meridian's control. And then there was Nathan, complicated, driven, increasingly essential to a vision that had become as much hers as his. She'd begun to trust him, perhaps even depend on him, in ways that made her vulnerable. Now he was heading to California to fight a battle in a corporate world she barely understood, against an adversary who seemed to have tentacles reaching in all directions. Emma finished her whiskey and checked her phone one last time. A text from Nathan had arrived while she was lost in thought. Landed in SF. Meeting with allies tomorrow before the board session. Whatever happens there, remember this. What we've built is real and valuable. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The message carried a weight beyond its practical content, an acknowledgement that their fates had become intertwined, their separate worlds now connected by something neither had anticipated. Emma replied simply, "We'll be ready when you return. CBU. Good luck." As she prepared for bed, Emma found herself hoping that luck would be enough. Because against the combined forces of Meridian and potentially Green Tech, with their seemingly unlimited resources and influence, the Sullivan Farm Cooperative would need every advantage it could find in the battles to come. Dawn broke over Silicon Valley, the golden light illuminating a landscape transformed from the orchards of Nathan's youth into a sprawling tech metropolis. From his hotel room, he could see the Green Tech headquarters, a gleaming complex of glass and steel that housed the company he'd founded and lost. Today, he would return there, not as CEO, but as an insurgent shareholder fighting to expose corruption from within. His phone pinged with emails and messages, updates from Emma about cooperative operations, reports from the legal team preparing their countersuit, and most urgently, intelligence from his allies within Green Tech about Blake's preparations for the board meeting. He's been meeting individually with board members for days, one source reported. The official agenda doesn't mention your proposal, but there's a closed executive session scheduled at the end. Nathan had expected as much. Blake would try to handle the potential investigation behind closed doors, where fewer disclosure requirements existed and pressure could be applied more directly. It was a classic containment strategy. A knock at his door revealed Diana Winters, looking as perfectly composed as always in a designer suit that probably cost more than most of the cooperative's farmers earned in a month. "Nathan," she greeted him with professional warmth. "May I come in?" He stepped aside, allowing her to enter. Her presence wasn't entirely surprising. Blake often sent Diana as an advanced negotiator before confrontations. "Blake sent you to take my temperature," Nathan observed as she declined his offer of coffee. "Actually, I came on my own," Diana replied, setting her leather portfolio on the table between them. "Because despite everything, I still consider you a friend." Nathan raised an eyebrow skeptically. "A friend you helped push out of his own company," Diana sighed. "Business and friendship sometimes conflict, but that's not why I'm here." She opened her portfolio and removed a document, sliding it across to him. "This is being presented to the board today. I thought you should see it before walking in unprepared." Nathan scanned the document, his expression darkening. It was a formal ethics complaint against him, alleging that he had used proprietary Green Tech information to target Meridian's agricultural operations in Harvest Valley. The evidence cited included time-stamped access logs showing he had downloaded confidential partnership agreements between Green Tech and Meridian before his departure from the company. "This is manufactured," Nathan stated flatly, though a twist of doubt formed in his stomach. He had indeed accessed those files, but legitimately as CEO reviewing potential partnerships. "Perhaps," Diana allowed, "but it's enough to initiate an ethics review, which would suspend your voting rights until resolution. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" Nathan studied her carefully. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Blake's tactics have become concerning," Diana admitted. "This goes beyond normal corporate competition. He's obsessed with destroying you, with proving he was right to take control of Green Tech." "And you're suddenly developing a conscience about it?" Nathan asked, unconvinced. Diana's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing genuine discomfort. "I believed in the vision of Green Tech as a company that used technology to solve real problems. Under Blake, we've become just another surveillance technology provider selling to the highest bidder." She hesitated. "And personally, I've seen what happens to people who cross him. It's not pretty." Nathan considered her words, searching for the angle, the hidden agenda. Diana was too skilled a player to act without purpose. "What do you want from me?" "A compromise," she replied directly. "Blake won't back down on Meridian's expansion in Harvest Valley. That deal is too valuable. But I might be able to convince him to allow your cooperative to exist alongside Meridian's operations, with clearly defined boundaries." "Segregated but equal?" Nathan scoffed. "That's not a compromise, it's containment." "It's survival," Diana countered. "Nathan, you're good with technology and vision, but Blake understands power, how to acquire it, how to use it, how to destroy those who challenge it. This ethics complaint is just the beginning. He has other leverage prepared if this fails." A chill ran through Nathan as he thought of Emma and the cooperative members, of the mysterious USB drive, of the increasing connections between Green Tech and Meridian. "What kind of leverage?" Diana shook her head. "I don't know specifics, but he's been working with specialized consultants, the kind corporations hire for aggressive opposition research and strategic pressure campaigns." The implication was clear. Blake was prepared to fight dirty, to target not just Nathan, but everyone associated with him in the cooperative. "Thank you for the warning," Nathan said finally, "but I can't accept constraints on the cooperative's growth. That would defeat its entire purpose." Diana gathered her materials, disappointment evident in her expression. "Then I've done what I can." At the door, she paused. "For what it's worth, I've been following what you're building in Harvest Valley. It's impressive. In another world, I might have helped you build it. After she left, Nathan examined the ethics complaint more carefully, looking for weaknesses, opportunities to counter. The timing was indeed suspicious. Filed just days before a board meeting where he planned to propose an investigation that would expose potential illegality in GreenTech's partnership with Meridian. He texted Emma a brief update, careful to avoid specifics that might be compromised if their communications were being monitored. Challenges as expected. Proceeding with our plan. Then how were things there? Her response came quickly. Reporter checked out legitimate. Interview scheduled for noon. Cooperative members standing firm despite lawsuit pressure. Mysterious package untouched. Nathan smiled despite the stress. Emma's steady pragmatism was a balm against the calculated manipulation that defined corporate warfare. Unlike the carefully constructed personas of Silicon Valley, she was authentically herself, sometimes abrasive, often stubborn, but always genuine. It was a quality he'd come to value more than he'd expected. His phone rang, his attorney calling with final preparations for the board meeting. Nathan pushed thoughts of Emma aside and focused on the coming battle. Whatever Blake had planned, Nathan needed to be ready with counter-moves of his own. The stakes were too high for anything less than his complete focus and determination. As he gathered his materials and prepared to leave for GreenTech headquarters, Nathan paused to look once more at the view from his window. Between the gleaming office towers, he could just make out a small patch of land that had once been part of his family's farm, now occupied by luxury condominiums. The sight strengthened his resolve. What had happened here, the erasure of agricultural heritage in favor of corporate expansion, was happening in Harvest Valley too. But this time, he had the chance to stop it. With that thought firmly in mind, Nathan straightened his tie, checked his presentation one last time, and headed out to confront the man who had taken his company, and who now threatened to destroy everything he was building with Emma and the cooperative. The GreenTech boardroom fell silent as Nathan finished his presentation. The evidence he'd gathered of collusion between GreenTech and Meridian, pricing arrangements that violated antitrust regulations, technology deployment designed to push independent farmers into financial distress, internal communications discussing market consolidation strategies that amounted to deliberate monopolistic practices, was compelling even to the most skeptical board members. Blake Foster sat at the head of the table, his expression carefully neutral despite the damning material Nathan had just presented. The other board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Corporate executives and venture capitalists who had backed GreenTech from its early days now confronted with potential legal liability. "This is certainly concerning information," said Elaine Rodriguez, the board's most independent-minded member. "If accurate, it suggests serious ethical and legal violations." "If accurate," Blake emphasized smoothly. "And that's a significant if. Mr. Hargrove has a personal vendetta against this company's leadership and a financial interest in damaging our agricultural partnerships." Nathan had anticipated this counterattack, which is precisely why I've had all evidence independently verified by third-party experts, whose credentials are included in your packets. This isn't about personal grievances. It's about corporate governance and legal compliance. Nevertheless, Blake continued, the timing of these allegations is suspect, coming just as your agricultural experiment in Harvest Valley faces legal challenges from Meridian. One might reasonably conclude this is an attempt to leverage corporate governance mechanisms for personal advantage. Several board members nodded at this framing, their initial concerns shifting toward skepticism. Nathan recognized the dynamics at play. Corporate directors were inherently risk-averse, predisposed to support current management unless the evidence of wrongdoing was overwhelming. "I believe Mr. Foster has his own presentation prepared," the board chairman noted, giving Blake the floor. Blake rose, buttoning his impeccable suit jacket. "Thank you, Chairman. Before addressing Mr. Hargrove's allegations directly, I believe the board should be aware of relevant context." The room darkened as Blake activated a presentation of his own. On the screen appeared photographs of the Sullivan farm, the cooperative headquarters, and most surprisingly, Emma speaking with farmers. For the past several months, Mr. Hargrove has been personally involved in an agricultural venture in rural Harvest Valley, investing significant financial resources in opposition to established industry partners, including Meridian Agricultural Holdings. This represents not only a conflict of interest given GreenTech's existing partnerships, but potentially misuse of proprietary information. Blake clicked to the next slide, displaying what appeared to be internal green tech documents with Nathan's access history highlighted. Prior to his departure from executive leadership, Mr. Hargrove accessed numerous confidential files related to our agricultural technology partnerships. Information that would provide significant competitive advantage to a rival operation. Nathan kept his expression neutral, though internally he was seething. Blake was doing exactly what Diana had warned, using the ethics complaint to discredit Nathan's evidence before the board could fully consider it. Additionally, Blake continued, his tone regretful, as if he took no pleasure in the revelations. There is the matter of Mr. Hargrove's declining judgment and emotional decision-making. Rather than pursuing rational business opportunities, he has become entangled in what can only be described as a personal crusade, heavily influenced by his close relationship with a local farmer. The screen displayed a photo of Nathan and Emma standing close together on the Sullivan farm porch, deep in conversation. The image was innocuous but framed to suggest intimacy beyond a business partnership. Nathan recognized the manipulation at work. Blake was implying that Nathan's judgment was compromised by emotional or romantic entanglements, a suggestion that would resonate with the tech industry's valorization of cold rationality over human connection. In light of these concerns, Blake concluded, I believe it would be appropriate for the board to refer Mr. Hargrove's allegations to the Ethics Committee for review, during which time his voting rights should be suspended in accordance with company bylaws regarding conflicts of interest. The chairman looked to the company's legal counsel, who nodded confirmation that the procedure Blake suggested was technically within the bylaws. Nathan realized he was being outmaneuvered. The ethics review would take months, effectively preventing him from using his board position or voting power to advance the investigation he sought. If I may respond, Nathan said, keeping his voice steady despite his growing anger. What Mr. Foster has presented is a transparent attempt to delay examination of serious allegations by attacking the messenger. The suggestion that my judgment is compromised by personal relationships is not only irrelevant, but insulting to the farmers of Harvest Valley, who have built a legitimate and innovative business model. He turned his attention directly to the board members. You all know me. You've worked with me for years building this company. Ask yourselves, why would Blake go to such lengths to prevent an independent investigation if there was nothing to hide? Elaine Rodriguez leaned forward. Mr. Hargrove makes a valid point. An ethics review could proceed simultaneously with an independent investigation of the allegations. They are separate matters. Blake's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, but company resources should be allocated judiciously. A full investigation would be costly and disruptive to ongoing operations. The Ethics Committee can determine whether the allegations merit such an investment. The debate continued for another hour, growing increasingly technical as they delved into bylaws, procedures, and the specific requirements for initiating different types of investigations. Nathan could see the energy draining from the room as Blake deliberately bogged the discussion down in procedural minutiae, a classic tactic to exhaust opposition and push for a compromise that effectively maintained the status quo. Finally, the chairman called for a vote on Blake's proposal to refer the matter to the Ethics Committee. Nathan watched as hands raised around the table, counting silently. The final tally was 7-5 in favor, with Elaine Rodriguez and 4 others supporting Nathan's position, but not enough to prevail. The matter will be referred to the Ethics Committee, the chairman announced. Mr. Hargrove's voting rights will be suspended pending their review. We'll reconvene when they have completed their assessment. Blake's victory was subtle but complete. He had effectively neutralized Nathan's power within Green Tech, while delaying any investigation into the Meridian Partnership indefinitely. As the meeting adjourned, board members filed out quickly, avoiding Nathan's eyes. The instinctive avoidance of the corporate world for those deemed to have lost a power struggle. Blake approached as Nathan gathered his materials. That went as expected, he observed, his tone almost friendly. You always were better at building things than playing politics, Nathan. This isn't over, Nathan replied quietly. The evidence exists regardless of whether the board chooses to look at it now. Blake's facade of collegial rivalry slipped for a moment, revealing colder calculation beneath. Evidence can disappear. Witnesses can reconsider their statements. Memory is such a malleable thing, especially when careers and reputations are at stake. The implicit threat was clear. Are you threatening to tamper with evidence? Nathan asked, deliberately loud enough for nearby directors to hear. Blake smiled unperturbed. Simply making an observation about the fragility of circumstantial cases. Speaking of fragile things, how is your little farm cooperative doing? I understand Meridian's lawsuit is causing quite a stir among your members. They're tougher than you think, Nathan said. Rural communities have been fighting corporate bullies for generations. Fighting and losing, Blake corrected. It's the inevitable course of progress. Small farms are inefficient, Nathan. They'll disappear whether you fight for them or not. Nathan studied his former friend, trying to understand the transformation from the idealistic business school classmate he'd once known to this calculating corporate predator. What happened to you, Blake? We started Green Tech to help people, not exploit them. Something flickered in Blake's eyes, a momentary hesitation, perhaps even a glimpse of the person he had once been. But it vanished quickly, replaced by practiced confidence. I grew up, he replied simply. I accepted reality instead of chasing idealistic fantasies. You should try it sometime. He checked his watch. I have another meeting. Do give my regards to Miss Sullivan. Tell her Meridian's offer to purchase her farm remains open. For now. As Blake walked away, Nathan resisted the urge to pursue the confrontation. Blake had won this round through procedural maneuvering, but the battle was far from over. Nathan still had options, evidence that could be provided to regulatory agencies, connections with journalists investigating agricultural consolidation, and most importantly, the cooperative itself, which was growing stronger despite Meridian's attempts to strangle it. Outside Green Tech headquarters, Nathan called Emma, needing to hear her voice, to reconnect with the tangible reality of what they were building amid the artificial constructs of corporate warfare. Bad news? Emma asked when he explained the board's decision. A setback, Nathan acknowledged. Blake managed to delay any investigation indefinitely. But he's worried, Emma. His tactics were desperate, scorched earth. He wouldn't fight this hard unless he knew how damaging the evidence is. What's our next move? Her practical question, focused on action rather than disappointment, reminded Nathan why their partnership worked. I'm meeting with regulatory contacts tomorrow, he replied. The evidence may be even more effective with the Federal Trade Commission than with Green Tech's board. And I'll be back in Harvest Valley the day after. We need to accelerate our plans for the cannery acquisition before Blake can interfere. Emma was silent for a moment. Dareem, there's something else you should know. That USB drive that was left on my porch? Ted verified it came from someone who works at Meridian's regional office. I haven't accessed the files, but they sent a message through a mutual contact claiming it contains internal communications about targeted operations against specific farms, including ours. Nathan's pulse quickened. This could be the smoking gun we need, but it could also be a trap, planted evidence to support their claims of trade secret theft. That's what Ted said, Emma confirmed. We've kept it isolated, but we need your technical expertise to examine it safely. I'll bring specialized equipment when I return, Nathan promised. And Emma, be careful. Blake made veiled threats today that went beyond normal business tactics. I'm concerned about how far he's willing to go. We're watching the farm, Emma assured him. Miguel and Carlos have organized a rotation with neighboring members. No one comes or goes without being seen. After ending the call, Nathan sat in his rental car, staring at the Green Tech building that housed the company he'd created. From the beginning, he'd envisioned technology that empowered rather than exploited, that gave people tools to thrive independently rather than mechanisms for control. Somewhere along the way, that vision had been perverted, twisted into its opposite, and he had been too absorbed in growth and expansion to notice until it was too late. The parallels with industrial agriculture were striking. Both fields had begun with genuine innovations that promised greater prosperity and security. Both had gradually consolidated into systems that extracted rather than enhanced value for communities. Both had replaced human relationships with algorithmic management and corporate hierarchy. As he drove away from Silicon Valley toward his evening meeting with potential regulatory allies, Nathan felt a renewed conviction in the alternative model he and Emma were building. The Sullivan Farm Cooperative wasn't just about agriculture. It was about reclaiming technology and capital as tools for community resilience, rather than instruments of extraction and control. Blake and his allies saw this as naive idealism, doomed to failure against the relentless logic of consolidation and scale. But what if they were wrong? What if the future belonged not to massive, centralized operations, but to networks of independent producers using appropriate technology to collaborate while maintaining their autonomy? It was a question Nathan intended to answer, not through corporate boardroom maneuvers, but through the practical demonstration already taking root in Harvest Valley soil. The interview with Sophia Chen had gone better than Emma expected. The reporter from Midwest Agricultural Digest had asked probing but fair questions about the cooperative structure, its economic viability, and the challenges of competing with corporate agriculture. Emma had found herself explaining their model with growing confidence, seeing it through Sophia's engaged interest as something truly innovative rather than merely defensive. What's fascinating, Sophia had noted toward the end of their conversation, is how you're combining old and new, traditional farming knowledge with modern distribution systems, community connections with digital coordination tools. It's neither purely nostalgic nor blindly progressive. That's exactly right, Emma had agreed, recognizing that Sophia had articulated something fundamental about their approach that Emma herself hadn't fully verbalized. We're not trying to preserve farming as a museum piece, but we're also not surrendering to a vision of agriculture that treats land and communities as mere resources to be optimized. Now, 2 days later, Emma sat in the cooperative headquarters reviewing the article Sophia had published. It was remarkably balanced, presenting the cooperative as a legitimate innovation in agricultural organization, while acknowledging the significant challenges it faced from established players like Meridian. Most importantly, it had already generated inquiries from farmers in neighboring counties interested in the model, as well as from restaurants and grocery chains looking for direct relationships with producers. Miguel entered, carrying a tablet displaying manifests for the day's shipments. "The Peterson Creamery pickup is running late," he reported, "but everything else is on schedule." Emma nodded, scanning the shipment details. The cooperative had managed to establish alternative processing and distribution channels for most of their members' products, though often at reduced margins while they built their own infrastructure. The Westfield Cannery acquisition would change that equation dramatically, providing control over a critical link in the value chain. "Any word from Nathan?" Miguel asked, his tone carefully neutral. "He's flying back tonight," Emma replied. The board meeting went as expected. They're delaying any investigation into Meridian and Greentech's practices. Miguel frowned. "So we're still facing them alone?" "Not alone," Emma corrected, gesturing to the bustling headquarters around them. "We have 23 member farms now, with another 8 considering joining. We have contracts with 17 restaurants and 4 independent grocery chains. We're not just surviving, we're growing." Miguel's expression softened into something like pride. "You're getting good at the big picture talk. Almost sound like a CEO yourself," Emma made a face. "God forbid. I'm still a farmer first. Speaking of which, the northeast field needs attention before the rain comes tomorrow." "Carlos is already on it," Miguel assured her. "He took a crew out at dawn." Emma nodded, unsurprised. Carlos had grown into a leadership role within the cooperative, coordinating field operations across member farms with an efficiency that impressed even the most experienced farmers. Something about the cooperative model had energized the younger generation in ways Emma hadn't anticipated, giving them ownership and responsibility rather than just jobs. As she and Miguel reviewed the day's operations, Ted arrived with a thick folder of documents, the final paperwork for the cannery purchase. "Everything's in order," he reported. "The sellers accepted our offer and the financing is secured. We can close as scheduled next week." He hesitated, then added, "There is one complication, though. The environmental inspection revealed some issues with one of the storage buildings, structural problems that will require additional repairs beyond what we budgeted." Emma frowned. "How much?" "About $400,000, Ted replied. "The good news is the location is still perfect, and the main processing facility is sound. We just need to decide whether to delay the closing to renegotiate or proceed and absorb the additional cost." Emma calculated quickly. "What's the risk of delay?" "Primarily that it gives Meridian time to make a counteroffer or pressure the seller," Ted explained. "The current owner is already nervous about selling to us given Meridian's lawsuit. Any hesitation on our part could push them toward a safer buyer. Then we proceed," Emma decided. "We'll find the additional funds somehow. The cannery is too important to our long-term viability to risk losing it." Ted nodded, though his expression remained concerned. "I'll prepare everything for closing then. Nathan's foundation is still providing half the financing, correct?" "Yes," Emma confirmed. "He's transferring those funds tomorrow upon his return." After Ted left, Emma found herself staring at the operational map that dominated one wall of the headquarters. Colored pins represented member farms, processing facilities, and distribution points, connected by strings showing the flow of products through their network. It was remarkably complex for an organization less than 2 months old, a physical representation of the alternative they were building to Meridian's centralized model. Her phone buzzed with a message from Carlos. Strange truck parked at the county road junction. Been there over an hour. No one inside that we can see. Emma frowned, typing back, license plate? Carlos responded quickly, covered in mud. Deliberately, I think. The hairs on the back of Emma's neck rose. Nathan's warning about Blake's veiled threats echoed in her mind. Keep your distance, but keep an eye on it, she instructed. Let me know if anything changes. She was about to call Miguel when the headquarters door burst open and Frank Rodriguez rushed in, his face flushed with anger and exertion. They're cutting the water, he announced without preamble. Meridian just diverted the creek that feeds my irrigation pond. They're claiming it's within their water rights on the adjacent property. Emma's stomach dropped. Water was life in agriculture, and Meridian knew it. When did this happen? Started this morning, Frank replied. My son noticed the flow decreasing and traced it upstream. They've installed a new diversion dam that sends most of the water to the reservoir on their corporate farm. That can't be legal, Emma protested, though she knew water rights were notoriously complex. They're claiming it is, Frank said grimly. Said they checked with county water authorities, and they're only using their allotted share. Convenient timing, Emma observed, her mind racing. Just as we're making real progress with the cooperative and the cannery purchase. Frank nodded, understanding immediately. It's not just me. The Wilsons and the Hansons both reported wells dropping significantly this past week. They're both downstream from Meridian-controlled properties. The pattern was clear. Meridian was using its strategic acquisition of properties with key water access to pressure cooperative members. Without immediate intervention, crops would wither, animals would suffer, and members would be forced to either leave the cooperative or sell their farms outright. We need legal action, Emma decided. Ted's already handling the lawsuit response. I'll have him add emergency motions regarding the water rights. In the meantime, we need emergency water delivery to affected farms. She turned to the operations coordinator, a retired teacher who had volunteered to help with logistics. Contact every member with water tankers. We need to establish a rotation for delivering water to Frank's farm and any others reporting issues. The coordinator nodded and began making calls. Emma turned back to Frank. How long can you manage with tanker deliveries? 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we're careful, he estimated. After that, the crops start suffering irreversible damage. We won't let it get that far, Emma promised, hoping she could keep that pledge. Water conflicts could drag on for months or even years in the courts, but crops couldn't wait for legal resolutions. As the cooperative mobilized its emergency water sharing protocol, Emma's phone buzzed again. Carlos had sent a photo of the suspicious truck, now with 2 men standing beside it, using binoculars to observe the Sullivan farm from a distance. Should we confront them? Carlos asked. Emma hesitated. Confrontation could escalate the situation, but letting unknown observers monitor their operations felt deeply unsettling. Before she could decide, another message arrived from Carlos. They're leaving now. Heading toward town. Follow at a safe distance, Emma instructed. Just get a license plate if possible. The water crisis and surveillance concerns occupied the rest of Emma's day. By evening, member farms had organized a water delivery rotation that would sustain Frank's operation temporarily, and Carlos had managed to get a partial license plate number from the mysterious truck, which had eventually parked outside Meridian's regional office. As Emma finally headed home, exhaustion weighed on her. The cooperative was fighting battles on multiple fronts simultaneously: legal, operational, financial, against an opponent with vastly superior resources. Nathan's return tomorrow would help, but she was increasingly aware that they were engaged in an asymmetric conflict where conventional victory might be impossible. Her farmhouse came into view as she rounded the final bend in the driveway, its familiar silhouette comforting despite the day's stresses. Emma had just parked when her phone rang. Nathan calling from the airport. I'm on my way, he said without preamble. Should be there in about 3 hours. How are things? Emma summarized the day's developments. The water diversions, the surveillance, the cannery inspection issues. Nathan listened without interrupting, though she could sense his tension mounting. Blake's escalating faster than I expected, he said when she finished. The water tactic is particularly concerning. It suggests he's got someone inside the county water authority. And the surveillance, that's not standard corporate practice. He's using private security contractors. For what purpose? Emma asked, a chill running through her despite the warm evening. Information gathering, intimidation, possibly looking for vulnerabilities, Nathan replied. We need to be extremely careful about security, both physical and digital. I'll bring specialized equipment to check for surveillance devices when I arrive. The suggestion that Meridian might have planted listening devices shocked Emma, though perhaps it shouldn't have. The boundaries of corporate tactics seem to be expanding daily. There's something else, Nathan continued, his voice dropping slightly. In my meeting with regulatory contacts today, I learned that Meridian recently acquired a cybersecurity firm specializing in competitive intelligence. In practice, that often means digital intrusion, hacking, essentially. You think they'd hack the cooperative? Emma asked incredulously. I think they're already trying, Nathan confirmed, which is why I've arranged for enhanced security measures to be implemented tonight. Our systems coordinator should be receiving instructions shortly. Emma absorbed this information, the scale of Meridian's response to their cooperative still difficult to comprehend. Why are they hitting us so hard? We're just a small group of farms trying to survive. Because we represent something dangerous to them, Nathan explained. Not just competition, but an alternative model that could spread. Blake sees the cooperative as a virus that needs to be contained before it infects the whole system. The metaphor was apt, Emma realized. Their cooperative wasn't just a business arrangement. It was an idea that challenged fundamental assumptions about agricultural organization, community resilience, and the relationship between capital and labor. I'll see you soon, Nathan concluded. Until then, stay alert and be careful what you discuss on electronic devices. After hanging up, Emma entered her farmhouse, the familiar spaces suddenly feeling less secure. The thought that she might be under surveillance, that private contractors might be watching her movements and monitoring her communications, was deeply unsettling. This wasn't the kind of battle she had prepared for when starting the cooperative. She understood droughts, market fluctuations, and equipment failures, not corporate espionage. She made a simple dinner and ate it on the porch, watching darkness settle over the fields. The Sullivan farm had witnessed 5 generations of her family's triumphs and struggles, but never anything quite like this. A conflict that blended ancient disputes over land and water with modern corporate warfare tactics. As night deepened, Emma noticed headlights approaching along the main road, still a mile from her driveway. The vehicle slowed as it neared the property, then stopped briefly before continuing past. A coincidence, perhaps, or another reminder that they were being watched. Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive. Emma found herself reviewing cooperative finances, trying to find the additional funds needed for the cannery repairs. Their margins were already thin as they built infrastructure and absorbed members displaced by Meridian's pressure tactics. The emergency water deliveries would further strain their resources. Around midnight, she heard a vehicle approaching and tensed until she recognized the distinctive sound of Nathan's rental car. Relief flooded through her as headlights swept across the windows and the engine shut off. Footsteps sounded on the porch, followed by a gentle knock. Emma opened the door to find Nathan looking as exhausted as she felt. His suit rumpled from travel, his expression a mixture of concern and determination. "You should be sleeping," he said by way of greeting. "So should you," she countered, stepping aside to let him enter. "But I'm glad you're here." Nathan set down his travel bag and a metallic briefcase she hadn't seen before. "I need to sweep for devices before we talk," he explained, opening the case to reveal specialized electronic equipment. Emma watched as he methodically moved through the main rooms of the farmhouse, scanning for surveillance devices. The process took nearly 30 minutes, during which neither spoke. Finally, Nathan returned to the kitchen where Emma waited. "Clean," he announced, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "At least here in the house. We'll need to check the barn and headquarters tomorrow." "You really think Meridian would go that far?" Emma asked, still struggling to accept this level of intrusion. "Blake would," Nathan confirmed grimly. "He sees this as war, Emma. And in war, information is often the most valuable weapon." They settled at the kitchen table, the familiar space a stark contrast to the corporate boardrooms where Nathan had spent the past days. Emma poured them both coffee, a silent acknowledgement that sleep would wait until they had addressed the immediate threats facing the cooperative. "The water situation is most urgent," Emma began. "We can manage with deliveries temporarily, but we need a permanent solution before crops fail." Nathan nodded. "I've already contacted a water rights attorney who specializes in agricultural disputes. She'll be here tomorrow to assess the situation. If Meridian has overstepped their legal rights, we can seek an emergency injunction." "And if they haven't," Emma pressed, "if they're technically within their rights, even though they're clearly acting to deliberately harm cooperative members, then we look for alternative water sources," Nathan replied. "Deeper wells, water purchases from non-Meridian properties, possibly even building additional reservoir capacity on cooperative lands to reduce vulnerability. All expensive options, Emma noted. Yes, Nathan acknowledged. Which brings us to the financial situation. The cannery repairs, emergency water measures, legal expenses, they're adding up faster than projected. Emma met his gaze directly. Can we afford all this? Nathan was silent for a moment, weighing honesty against reassurance. It will be tight, he admitted finally. The Foundation's resources are substantial but not unlimited. And with my green tech voting rights suspended, I can't access certain investments without triggering penalties. So we need to prioritize, Emma concluded practically. The cannery has to be first. Without processing capacity, the cooperative can't scale. Water solutions come second, since we have temporary measures in place. Legal defense third. Nathan studied her with something like admiration. You've become quite the strategist. Emma shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Just farm sense. You allocate limited resources to what matters most, when it matters most. It's more than that, Nathan insisted. You see the system clearly, the interdependencies, the critical points of leverage. That's why the cooperative has grown so quickly despite Meridian's opposition. Their conversation continued into the early morning hours, planning defenses against Meridian's multi-pronged attack. As dawn approached, they had formulated responses to the immediate crises and longer-term strategies for building cooperative resilience against corporate pressure. You should get some rest, Nathan said finally, gathering his notes. Tomorrow will be demanding. Emma nodded, the exhaustion finally catching up to her. The guest room is made up. As Nathan collected his belongings, Emma noticed how naturally they had fallen into a partnership of equals. Her practical knowledge of farming and community dynamics complementing his corporate strategic thinking and technological expertise. Despite their different backgrounds and initial mistrust, they had formed an effective team against Blake Foster's sophisticated attacks. Nathan, she said as he headed toward the guest room, why does Blake hate you so much? This feels beyond normal business rivalry. Nathan paused, considering the question. We were friends once. Real friends, not just business associates. I trusted him completely, which is why I didn't see the betrayal coming until too late. He hesitated, then added, but I think what truly drives him now is fear that I might expose who he really is, not just to others, but to himself. Blake needs to believe that ruthlessness is the only path to success, that exploitation is inevitable. Our cooperative threatens that narrative. The insight was surprisingly personal, revealing a depth of reflection Emma hadn't fully appreciated in Nathan before. So this isn't just about business for him either, she concluded. No, Nathan agreed quietly. For Blake, defeating us has become proof that his worldview is correct, that compassion and cooperation are weaknesses, not strengths. That's what makes him so dangerous. He's not just protecting profits, he's protecting his entire self-conception. With that sobering assessment, they parted for what remained of the night, both knowing that the coming days would test not just their business model, but their fundamental beliefs about what was possible in a world where power and capital seemed increasingly concentrated in fewer hands. The next morning arrived with a development that changed everything. Emma woke to urgent knocking at her door and found Carlos on the porch, his expression a mixture of excitement and concern. You need to see this, he said, handing her his tablet. On the screen was a breaking news article from a major business publication. Green Tech board member resigns, alleges illegal practices. The story detailed how Elaine Rodriguez, the board member who had supported Nathan's call for investigation, had publicly resigned her position, citing evidence of systematic violations of antitrust regulations and potentially illegal collusion with agricultural partners. She went public, Emma breathed, scanning the article quickly. Elaine had provided journalists with documents supporting her allegations. Some of the same evidence Nathan had presented to the board, but which they had refused to investigate formally. There's more, Carlos said, taking the tablet and opening another browser tab. This article from a different publication announced that the Federal Trade Commission had opened a preliminary investigation into both Green Tech and Meridian based on whistleblower information about anti-competitive practices in agricultural markets. Nathan appeared in the doorway, already reading the news on his own phone. Blake's worst nightmare, he observed, a grim satisfaction in his voice. Public scrutiny and regulatory investigation, all at once. Will this stop them? Emma asked, hope rising despite her natural caution. Not immediately, Nathan replied honestly, but it changes the calculus significantly. Blake will need to divert resources to legal defense and public relations damage control. And more importantly, Meridian's aggressive tactics against the cooperative now risk becoming evidence in a federal investigation. The implications were significant. Meridian couldn't easily continue water diversions, frivolous lawsuits, and surveillance operations while under regulatory scrutiny for anti-competitive behavior. Any action that appeared to target independent farmers would strengthen the case against them. We need to document everything, Emma decided. Every water diversion, every contract cancellation, every intimidation tactic. It's all potential evidence now. Nathan nodded agreement. I'll contact the attorney who's coming today about the water rights issues. She needs to coordinate with the whistleblower's legal team and potentially the FTC investigators. As they formulated plans to leverage this unexpected development, Emma's phone rang with a call from Frank Rodriguez. The water's back, he reported, audible relief in his voice. Flow to my irrigation pond has returned to normal levels. The diversion dam is still there, but they've opened the gates. Similar reports came in throughout the morning. Farms that had experienced water pressure drops reported normalization. The surveillance truck was nowhere to be seen. Even the local newspaper, which had previously published Meridian's perspective uncritically, ran a balanced article about the cooperative's growth and economic impact on the region. They're in retreat, Nathan observed as they reviewed these developments at the cooperative headquarters. Temporarily, at least. Why temporarily? Asked one of the newer cooperative members. Because corporations like Meridian have weathered regulatory investigations before, Nathan explained. They'll hunker down, make superficial changes, pay fines if necessary, and wait for public attention to shift elsewhere. Then they'll resume their consolidation strategy, perhaps with more subtle tactics. Emma understood the warning in his assessment. So we have a window of opportunity, not a permanent victory. Exactly, Nathan confirmed. We need to use this time to strengthen our position, close on the cannery, expand membership, secure alternative water sources, build processing capacity. The more self-sufficient and interconnected the cooperative becomes, the harder it will be for Meridian to isolate and pressure individual members when they resume aggressive tactics. The cooperative leadership team spent the day accelerating projects that had been planned for later stages of development. Ted confirmed that the cannery closing could proceed as scheduled next week. The water rights attorney identified several strategic properties with strong water access that could serve as cooperative reserve sources in future conflicts. The marketing team finalized direct contracts with restaurant chains and grocery cooperatives in 3 states, expanding their customer base beyond Meridian's regional influence. By evening, the immediate crisis atmosphere had transformed into purposeful activity. The cooperative members moved with renewed confidence, energized by Meridian's tactical retreat and the validation it represented. Their model was working well enough to frighten a corporate giant, proof that they were on the right track. As the workday concluded, Emma found Nathan in the orchard, inspecting the apple trees that would bear fruit in the fall. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows across his face as he examined a developing fruit cluster. Not bad for a tech executive, Emma observed, nodding toward his knowledgeable inspection. Nathan smiled. My father would be horrified at how much I've forgotten. But some things stay with you. The rhythm of seasons, the patience required for trees. Emma leaned against a nearby trunk, studying him. Over the past months, Nathan had changed in subtle ways. His skin tanned from outdoor work, his movements more aligned with natural cycles, his speech patterns occasionally adopting the cadence and expressions of the farming community. He hadn't abandoned his corporate strategic thinking or technological expertise, but he had integrated them with older, more grounded ways of knowing. What happens now, she asked. With green tech, with your board position? Nathan sighed, releasing the branch he'd been examining. Legally, the ethics complaint is probably moot given the federal investigation. My voting rights should be reinstated, though it hardly matters now that the issues are being investigated externally. And Blake? He'll fight, Nathan said simply. Publicly, privately, legally, possibly illegally. This is an existential threat to his power and self-image. But he'll be fighting on multiple fronts now, not just against us. Emma nodded, understanding the shift in dynamics. And us? The cooperative? We keep building, Nathan replied, his gaze moving from the trees to the broader landscape of the Sullivan farm, with its fields, buildings, and people working together. This was never just about defeating Meridian or exposing green tech's practices. It was about creating an alternative that works better for farmers, for communities, for the land itself. The simple statement captured what had evolved between them. A partnership aimed not merely at survival or profit, but at fundamental transformation of how agriculture could function. It wasn't idealistic in the dismissive sense Blake used the term, but genuinely innovative, blending traditional farming wisdom with appropriate technology, local connection with broader networks. "We still need to check the cannery repairs estimate," Emma said, returning to practical matters, "and finalize the water rights strategy with the attorney." "Tomorrow," Nathan agreed. "For now, let's just appreciate that we've survived the first major assault." Not every cooperative member would have stood firm under that kind of pressure. Emma followed his gaze to where cooperative members were loading trucks with the day's harvests, working together with the efficiency that comes from shared purpose. They're not just standing firm, they're thriving. Every crisis Meridian created has actually strengthened our internal connections. That's the fundamental difference between our model and theirs, Nathan observed. In their system, pressure reveals weakness. In ours, it reveals strength. As the sun began to set over Harvest Valley, casting long shadows across fields that had sustained generations, Emma felt a sense of cautious optimism. The battle was far from over. Blake Foster and Meridian would regroup, adapt, and attack again with different tactics. But the cooperative had proven its resilience, demonstrating that even in a system designed to favor corporate consolidation, alternatives could take root and flourish. The true harvest of their work wasn't just the crops in the fields or the products moving through their distribution network. It was the restoration of hope in a community that had been resigning itself to slow extinction, the reconnection of people to purpose beyond mere survival, the rediscovery of strength in mutual support rather than isolated competition. Nathan's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He checked it, a slight smile forming. "What is it?" Emma asked. "Diana Winters just resigned from Green Tech," he replied. "She's offered to provide evidence for the FTC investigation." Blake's inner circle is fracturing, Emma realized. Nathan nodded. When systems start to fail, they often collapse faster than anyone expects. People who were afraid to speak suddenly find their voices. Those who compromise their values for security reconsider their choices. The parallels to farming were clear to Emma. How a field could appear unchanged until suddenly the first green shoots broke through, revealing growth that had been happening invisibly beneath the surface all along. Perhaps the corporate systems of control that seemed so permanent, so inevitable, were similarly vulnerable to transformative change when the right conditions aligned. As night fell over the Sullivan farm, Emma and Nathan walked back toward the house, their conversation turning to the next day's tasks and longer-term plans for the cooperative's growth. Neither could predict exactly how their conflict with Meridian would unfold or what new challenges would emerge. But both understood that what they were building transcended the immediate battle, offering a template for resistance and renewal that could spread far beyond Harvest Valley soil. 6 months had transformed Harvest Valley. The old Westfield cannery, once abandoned and deteriorating, now hummed with activity as cooperative members processed the fall harvest. The facility's weathered brick exterior remained largely unchanged, but inside, carefully selected modern equipment operated alongside refurbished legacy machinery, blending efficiency with craftsmanship in a way that honored both innovation and tradition. Emma walked the processing floor, clipboard in hand, nodding to workers as she conducted her weekly inspection. Most were local residents, former farm laborers who had once worked for Meridian-controlled operations and now earned higher wages with profit-sharing opportunities through the cooperative. Their faces showed pride rather than resignation, ownership rather than mere employment. In the quality control lab, Carlos supervised testing of tomato sauce batches destined for restaurants across 3 states. He had discovered an unexpected talent for food science, combining his practical farming knowledge with college courses he'd begun taking online through the cooperative's education partnership with the state university. "The acidity is perfect on this batch," he reported as Emma entered, "and we're getting consistent color across production days." "The restaurant clients will be pleased," Emma replied. "They've been raving about the flavor consistency compared to the mass-produced alternatives." Carlos grinned. "Turns out treating soil like a living system instead of a chemical delivery mechanism makes better food." "Who knew?" His dry humor reflected the quiet confidence that had developed throughout the cooperative. What had begun as a desperate defense against corporate takeover had evolved into a genuine alternative that competed on quality, sustainability, and increasingly price. Emma continued her rounds, emerging onto the loading dock where trucks bearing the Sullivan Farm Cooperative logo prepared to deliver products directly to customers. Miguel oversaw the logistics, his decades of experience now augmented by digital tracking systems that Nathan had customized for agricultural supply chains. Right on schedule, Miguel noted with satisfaction as Emma approached. Denver delivery leaves in 20 minutes, Kansas City tomorrow morning. Any word from the new Montana farms? Emma asked. Miguel nodded. Their first shipments arrived this morning. Good quality, especially considering this is their first season in the cooperative model. The expansion to farms in neighboring states had been a significant milestone, proving their approach could scale beyond Harvest Valley. Each new region added resilience to the network while preserving local knowledge and control, a stark contrast to Meridian's centralized, homogenized operations. Emma checked her watch and headed to the administration building, a renovated portion of the cannery where the cooperative's growing office staff coordinated between member farms, processing facilities, and customers. The space buzzed with purposeful energy. Farmers consulting with marketing specialists, logistics coordinators optimizing delivery routes, tech support maintaining the systems that connected it all. Nathan waited in the conference room, deep in conversation with representatives from an organic certification agency. He looked up as Emma entered, a quick smile of recognition passing between them before he returned to the discussion. As you can see from our soil testing protocols, he was explaining, all member farms maintain regenerative practices that exceed organic standards. We're simply seeking formal certification to access certain market segments that require it. The certification representative nodded approvingly. Your documentation is impressively thorough. Most organizations starting this process have significant gaps. We believe in measuring what matters, Nathan replied. Soil health, biodiversity, carbon sequestration, these aren't just marketing points for us. They're foundational to our farming philosophy. As the meeting concluded and the representatives departed with promises of expedited review, Nathan turned to Emma. Sorry about the timing. I know we're scheduled to meet with the expansion committee. It's fine, Emma assured him. The certification is important, especially for the direct-to-consumer branded products. They walked together toward the larger conference room where cooperative leadership gathered weekly to address strategic decisions. Their partnership had settled into a comfortable rhythm over the months, each bringing distinct strengths while respecting the other's domain expertise. Have you seen the latest Meridian quarterly report? Nathan asked as they walked. Emma nodded grimly. Regional revenue down 18%. They're blaming abnormal market conditions rather than admitting they're losing customers to us. Classic corporate deflection, Nathan observed, but their shareholders aren't fooled. The stock is down nearly 30% since the FTC investigation began. The federal investigation into green tech and Meridian's anti-competitive practices continued, moving with the deliberate pace of government action. Meanwhile, the class action lawsuit filed by farmers who had been squeezed out by Meridian's tactics had been certified by a federal judge, creating another front in the legal battle against corporate agricultural consolidation. Blake's position doesn't look secure, Emma noted. The financial press is speculating about board pressure for new leadership. He'll fight to the end, Nathan predicted. His entire identity is wrapped up in proving that his model of business is superior. Our success challenges everything he believes about how the world works. They entered the conference room where the expansion committee, a mix of original Harvest Valley farmers and newer members from surrounding regions, had gathered. Frank Rodriguez, who now headed the committee, called the meeting to order. Today's agenda focuses on 3 items, he began. First, the Montana expansion progress. Second, the proposal to establish a farmer training program. And third, the recent approach from investors interested in replicating our model in the Pacific Northwest. Emma and Nathan took their seats among the other members rather than at the head of the table, a deliberate choice that reflected the cooperative's governance philosophy. While they remained central to strategic direction, decisions emerged through collective deliberation rather than executive decree. The discussion unfolded with the practical focus that characterized the cooperative's approach. The Montana expansion was proceeding well, with 23 farms now fully integrated into the network. The farmer training program, designed to help conventional farmers transition to regenerative practices and cooperative membership, had received twice the expected applications for its first cohort. The third agenda item generated the most debate: how to respond to impact investors who wanted to fund a similar cooperative network in Washington and Oregon, potentially creating a federation of regional cooperatives across the western United States. The capital would accelerate expansion, argued one of the newer members, and having allied cooperatives would create even more market leverage. But we'd need guarantees of autonomy, countered a founding Harvest Valley farmer. The moment financial backers start dictating operational decisions, we're back to the Meridian model with different owners. Nathan listened carefully before speaking. Having worked with impact investors before, I can tell you they range from genuinely aligned partners to conventional capital wearing ethical disguises. The key is structuring any agreement to preserve local control, regardless of funding source. Emma added her perspective. What matters isn't just who provides capital, but how governance is structured. We need to ensure that farmer members maintain decision-making authority, even as we scale. The discussion continued, weighing opportunities against risks, growth against independence. Unlike the crisis-driven decisions of the cooperative's early days, they now had the luxury of careful deliberation, of learning from their own experience rather than reacting to external threats. By meeting's end, they had reached consensus. They would engage with the potential investors, but from a position of strength, insisting on governance safeguards that preserve the cooperative's core values. A working group was formed to develop specific proposals for the next meeting. As members dispersed to their various responsibilities, Ted arrived with news that cast the day's strategic discussions in sharper relief. "It's official," he announced, waving a legal document. "The court granted our motion for summary judgment in Meridian's lawsuit against the cooperative. Case dismissed with prejudice." A cheer went up from those still in the room. The lawsuit, once an existential threat, had dragged on despite the FTC investigation, draining resources and creating uncertainty. Its dismissal removed a significant cloud that had hung over the cooperative since its founding. Their legal basis was always thin, Ted explained. But with the evidence that emerged during discovery about their systematic attempts to eliminate independent farming, the judge wasn't just unconvinced by their claims, she was openly critical of their litigation strategy. Emma felt a weight lift that she hadn't fully acknowledged was still there. The cooperative had been succeeding despite the lawsuit, but its resolution eliminated both practical and psychological barriers to further growth. "This calls for a celebration," Frank declared. "Harvest Festival is this weekend anyway. We'll make it a double celebration." The annual Harvest Festival had once been a modest community gathering. Under the cooperative's revival, it had expanded into a regional event that showcased their products, practices, and vision for agriculture's future. This year's festival would now carry additional significance, marking not just a successful growing season, but a definitive legal victory against corporate overreach. As members dispersed to spread the news, Emma and Nathan found themselves alone in the conference room, the day's developments settling between them. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" Emma asked, looking out the window at the bustling cannery complex that symbolized how far they'd come. Nathan considered the question seriously. "I believed in the model," he said finally, "but I underestimated how powerfully people would respond once they saw a viable alternative to corporate agriculture. That's been the real surprise. Not that the approach works economically, but how it transforms communities beyond the balance sheet." Emma nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Throughout Harvest Valley, the changes were visible in ways that transcended business metrics. Young people who had been leaving for urban opportunities were returning to farms with renewed purpose. Local businesses were thriving as agricultural wealth circulated within the community rather than being extracted to distant corporate headquarters. Schools reported higher enrollment as families put down roots rather than suffering the precarity of industrial agricultural employment. "We should finish the inspection rounds," Emma said, returning to the practical as was her nature. "The Montana representatives will be arriving this evening for tomorrow's orientation." As they walked through the facility, they encountered Diana Winters, once GreenTech's public relations chief, now the cooperative's communications director. Her defection from Blake's inner circle had been followed by others as GreenTech's culture soured under increasing regulatory scrutiny and financial pressure. "Perfect timing," Diana greeted them. "I've just finished the press packet for the Harvest Festival, and you've both been requested for interviews with that National Sustainable Agriculture magazine." "You handle the media," Emma replied automatically. "I've got crops to check," Diana smiled knowingly. "They specifically asked for you, Emma. Apparently, farmers across the country are interested in hearing from someone who's actually making the cooperative model work, not just theorizing about it." Emma sighed but nodded reluctant agreement. Her discomfort with the spotlight remained, though she had learned to overcome it when necessary for the cooperative's benefit. 1 interview, no photographs. 2 interviews, 1 photograph. Diana countered with the negotiating skill that made her effective in her role. The members deserve to see their work recognized, Emma. You're just the representative. Put that way, Emma couldn't easily refuse. Fine, schedule it after harvest checks tomorrow. As Diana departed, Nathan suppressed a smile at the exchange. You've become the reluctant face of a movement, you know. Farmers from Georgia to Oregon are talking about pulling a Sullivan, standing up to corporate consolidation through cooperation. Emma rolled her eyes, though the impact of their work did secretly please her. I'm still just trying to keep my family farm alive. The revolution is your department. It's working, though, Nathan observed as they exited the building into the clear autumn afternoon. When Blake called our approach a virus that might infect the system, he wasn't entirely wrong. Ideas spread when they work better than existing alternatives. They walked toward the Sullivan farm, which remained Emma's home, and the symbolic heart of the cooperative, despite its evolution into a much larger entity. The fields that had once faced foreclosure now demonstrated cutting-edge regenerative practices, hosting regular tours for farmers interested in transitioning from conventional methods. As they crested the hill overlooking the homestead, Nathan paused, taking in the view of the farm where everything had begun. 6 months ago, he wouldn't have noticed the subtle indicators of health that now seemed obvious. The diverse insect life hovering over cover crops, the rich darkness of properly managed soil, the vibrant hues of plants grown in balanced ecosystems, rather than chemical dependency. Blake called this morning, he said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. First direct contact since the board meeting. Emma turned to him, surprised. What did he want? To offer a truce, according to him, Nathan replied, his expression skeptical. In reality, to propose merging the cooperative into Meridian's operations as a premium brand division with suitable compensation for leadership. Emma snorted. Suitable compensation meaning buying us off while dismantling everything we built. Exactly, Nathan confirmed. I told him we weren't interested. He wasn't surprised, but I think he felt obligated to try before the shareholder meeting next week. The upcoming Green Tech shareholder meeting had become a referendum on Blake's leadership, with institutional investors increasingly skeptical of his strategy and management following the regulatory investigations and declining financial performance. Industry analysts predicted a potential leadership change if Blake couldn't demonstrate a compelling plan to address the cooperative's growing market impact. What do you think will happen to him? Emma asked as they resumed walking. Nathan considered the question. Best case for Blake, he retains control but with a significantly reformed board and mandate. Worst case, he's removed entirely. Either way, Green Tech and Meridian will be forced to compete legitimately rather than through manipulation and intimidation. And either way, we keep building, Emma concluded. We keep building, Nathan agreed. They reached the farmhouse, still a working farmer's home, despite Emma's increasingly regional leadership role. The porch where they had once awkwardly negotiated their initial partnership now served as an informal gathering place where cooperative members shared meals, solved problems, and gradually forged a community that transcended business relationships. Today, the porch held a special visitor, Emma's mentor from agricultural college, Dr. Helen Chen, who had traveled from the university to assess the cooperative's practices for a research study on sustainable farming systems. There you are, Helen called as they approached. I've been exploring the demonstration fields. Remarkable progress in soil carbon sequestration, especially on the North 40 that was so depleted. Emma smiled at the validation from someone whose scientific opinion she deeply respected. Miguel's been leading that regeneration project. He's combined traditional techniques from his family's farming background with newer approaches to microbial soil management. They joined Helen on the porch, the conversation flowing naturally between scientific measurements and practical farming wisdom. The integration of knowledge systems that characterize the cooperative's approach. What you're building here isn't just agriculturally significant, Helen observed after listening to their accounts of the cooperative's development. It's a social innovation that addresses multiple crises simultaneously: economic concentration, climate change, rural community decline, food system vulnerabilities. Nathan nodded. That's why it's gaining traction beyond Harvest Valley. People recognize that our current systems are increasingly fragile despite, or perhaps because of, their scale and apparent efficiency. Or perhaps people simply prefer having agency in their lives and communities, Emma suggested. Corporations like Meridian offer security in exchange for control. We've demonstrated that greater security is possible through cooperation while preserving independence. Helen studied them both with the assessing eye of a scientist observing an unexpected experimental outcome. You've created something genuinely transformative by combining elements that conventional wisdom treats as oppositional: technology and tradition, capital investment and community control, individual initiative and collective action. The assessment was gratifying, but Emma remained grounded in the practical challenges that still faced them. We've created a promising start, she corrected. Meridian and other corporate giants still control most of the agricultural system. What we've proven is that alternatives are possible, not that they're inevitable. True enough, Helen acknowledged. But historically, demonstrating possibility is often the critical first step toward larger transformation. You've created a working model that others can adapt and improve upon. As the afternoon progressed, Helen departed to continue her research observations, while Emma and Nathan prepared for the evening's activities. The cooperative leadership team would be gathering for dinner to welcome the Montana representatives and celebrate the lawsuit dismissal. Should we tell them about Blake's offer? Emma asked as they walked toward her truck. Nathan considered this. Yes, but framed properly, not as a threat but as validation. Corporate agriculture is beginning to recognize that they need to adapt to what we're building rather than simply trying to destroy it. Emma nodded, seeing the strategic value in this perspective. From defense to influence. That's a significant shift in 6 months. The dinner that evening was held in the renovated barn that had served as the cooperative's first headquarters. Now used primarily for community gatherings, the space retained its agricultural character while accommodating the growing network of people connected to their work. Farmers from 3 states mingled with processors, distributors, restaurateurs, and supporters who had contributed to the cooperative's success. The atmosphere was celebratory but purposeful, not merely marking achievements, but strengthening the relationships that would carry their work forward. Emma observed the gathering with quiet satisfaction, particularly noting how younger farmers engaged enthusiastically with more experienced members, exchanging knowledge across generations. This transfer of wisdom, combined with openness to innovation, was perhaps the cooperative's most significant achievement, ensuring that agricultural heritage wasn't lost even as practices evolved. Nathan joined her, 2 glasses of local cider in hand. Frank's about to make the announcement about the lawsuit, he said, offering her a glass. You should be the one to tell them about the Montana expansion progress. Emma accepted the cider but shook her head at the suggestion. The Montana farmers should speak for themselves. This isn't about us anymore, Nathan. It's about all of them. He followed her gaze across the room, understanding her